The questioner's looping voice. You ask a simple question, why? It seems straightforward, natural even. From the moment we open our eyes to the world, curiosity stirs within us. We seek reasons, causes, explanations, the very foundation of understanding. But what if this question, why, is not the end, but only the beginning? What if the act of asking itself traps us in a loop, an endless spiral where every answer only births another question, deeper and more complex? This is the paradox of the questioner's looping voice, a ceaseless echo within the mind that never finds rest. Imagine a child who asks, why is the sky blue? The answer might be about the scattering of sunlight in the atmosphere. Satisfied, the child might nod. But then comes another question. Why does sunlight scatter? And when you answer that, you reveal the properties of light and particles, which naturally leads to, why do particles behave like that? Suddenly, the simple question multiplies into a web of complexity that stretches out infinitely. The deeper the layers, the more labyrinthine the path of understanding becomes. This looping questioning is not just a child's game, it is a fundamental pattern of human thought. Philosophy, science, even everyday problem-solving depend on this recursive curiosity. Yet, beneath its brilliance lies a cage, an infinite regress where each answer demands a further explanation, and certainty becomes ever more elusive. Consider the famous example of the cosmological question, why does the universe exist? Many answers have been proposed, a cause, a creator, a quantum fluctuation, or an eternal cycle. But each proposed cause inevitably faces the same question. Why does that cause exist? The answer must then point to something else, and so on, without a definitive stopping point. This endless chain of whys is what philosophers call an infinite regress. It challenges the very idea of a foundation for knowledge or existence. Even in everyday life, this pattern manifests subtly. When we try to understand ourselves, we ask, why do I feel this way? The answer might be linked to an experience, a memory, or a biological response. But then comes, why did that experience affect me? Or, why does my brain react like that? This leads us further down layers of introspection, neuroscience, and even genetics. Each explanation opens a new doorway to more questions. The mind is like a hall of mirrors, reflecting question after question endlessly. Why does this happen? Why are we built to question endlessly? Some might say it is the engine of human progress. Without it, innovation and discovery would stall. Others argue it is a curse, a restless hunger that can never be fully satisfied, causing anxiety and doubt. But the most profound understanding is that the question itself is not a problem to be solved, but a reflection of our consciousness. The looping voice is the sound of awareness turning inward, questioning itself. To grasp this better, imagine a snake biting its own tail, forming a circle with no clear beginning or end. The ancient symbol called Ouroboros. The question why is like that snake, endlessly devouring itself. Every layer of inquiry folds back on the last, creating a loop without a terminal point. But this loop is not just circular, it is spiraling, expanding deeper into realms of thought and experience. This infinite cage can be both torment and liberation. When trapped in the endless cycle of why, one might feel lost, unable to find final answers. Yet, paradoxically, embracing this loop can lead to profound insight. Recognizing that some questions might not have ultimate answers frees us from the compulsion to solve everything. It invites a new kind of wisdom, one that rests in mystery, accepts uncertainty, and finds peace in the process of questioning itself. This is reflected in many spiritual traditions where the question, who am I, leads to an inner silence beyond words. The answers dissolve, and what remains is pure awareness, free from the looping voice. Here, the paradox resolves, not by breaking the loop, but by transcending the need to ask at all. Still, for the restless mind, the looping voice is persistent. It urges us to chase answers, to build theories, to seek certainty in a world that defies it. This is the essence of human curiosity, relentless, recursive, and eternal. It propels science from the microcosm of atoms to the macrocosm of galaxies. It fuels philosophy from ethics to metaphysics. It shapes art, literature, and culture, all born from the desire to understand the why behind the why. Examples from history illustrate this. Socrates, the father of philosophy, was known for his endless questioning, often irritating those around him by never settling for superficial answers. His method was to keep peeling back layers of assumed knowledge until only fundamental truths remained, or sometimes until nothing certain could be found. This Socratic questioning embodies the looping voice, a tool for deepening understanding and exposing ignorance. In modern science, the search for a theory of everything echoes this pattern. Physicists seek a fundamental explanation that unifies all forces and particles. Yet even this ultimate theory faces the question, why this theory? Or, why do the laws of physics hold? These questions lead into philosophical and metaphysical territory, showing that the looping voice crosses the boundaries of disciplines. In psychology, this pattern manifests as metacognition, thinking about thinking. When you ask yourself, why am I thinking this? You activate a recursive loop that can either help clarify your thoughts or trap you in analysis paralysis. The questioner's looping voice is the internal dialogue that shapes self-awareness, but can also fuel anxiety or obsessive reflection. So, how do we live with this looping voice? One approach is to embrace it as part of the human condition, to let curiosity be a companion rather than a captor. Another is to cultivate mindfulness, learning to observe the voice without being consumed by it. Recognizing the difference between productive questioning and endless rumination is key. Philosophically, some suggest adopting foundational beliefs or axioms to halt the regress, not because they are ultimately provable, but because they provide a working ground for thought and action. In this way, the infinite loop is bridged by choice, faith, or convention. In conclusion, the questioner's looping voice is the ceaseless echo of curiosity that defines consciousness. It traps us in infinite regress, but also drives growth, discovery, and self-awareness. It is a paradox, both cage and key, torment and liberation. To live fully is to recognize this voice, to listen deeply, and to find balance between questioning endlessly and accepting mystery. So, next time you ask, why, remember, it is not just a question but a journey. Each why leads to another, deeper and wider, inviting you into the infinite dance of thought. And sometimes, in that dance, the real answer is not a final destination, but the endless music of inquiry itself. The observer of the observer. You observe yourself being observed. At first, this sounds like a simple idea, almost like a curious thought experiment. But when you begin to unpack it, you step into a world where perception, consciousness, and reality begin to twist and fold back on themselves, creating a profound loop with no clear beginning or end. Imagine for a moment that you are watching yourself from the outside. Not just physically, but mentally. Your awareness is split, seeing itself as if through another's eyes. Now take it one step further. The version of you that observes is itself being watched by yet another self. This is not just a layered mirror, but an infinite regress of observers, each nested within the other, spiraling inward and outward simultaneously. This infinite chain of observation eventually closes back upon itself, forming a feedback loop. Picture standing between two mirrors facing each other, where your reflection bounces endlessly, fading into a blur of infinite images. Similarly, when you become both the observer and the observed, the line between subject and object dissolves. The observer and the observed merge into one continuous loop, causing the very act of observation to implode into itself. In this loop, the you once identified with starts to vanish, swallowed by the endless cycle of watching and being watched. To grasp this more deeply, let's explore what observation really means. Traditionally, we think of observation as a one-way act, a subject looking at an object. But what if the subject is also an object? And what if this object is being watched by another subject? When you observe yourself observing, the distinction between subject and object breaks down. Your consciousness becomes entangled in a self-referential paradox. Who is the observer and who is the observed? This paradox isn't just philosophical. It echoes in science, psychology, and even quantum physics. Consider the famous observer effect in quantum mechanics. A particle's state can remain indeterminate until it is observed. But what if the observer itself is under observation? This leads to questions about the nature of reality itself. Is the universe dependent on observation to exist? And if observation loops infinitely back on itself, does reality collapse into an endless hall of mirrors where no stable thing or self can be pinned down? Psychologically, this feedback loop can feel disorienting. When you become hyper-aware of yourself watching yourself, it can lead to a strange sensation of detachment, even dissociation. This is sometimes described in deep meditation or moments of self-reflective anxiety, where the boundary between line and other fades away. You might feel as if you are observing a version of yourself from the outside, yet that version is watching another, and so on. A recursive fractal of selves. Imagine a writer drafting a story about a writer who writes about a writer who writes about a writer. Each layer folds into the next, and the narrative loops endlessly. The original writer loses distinctness amid the infinite reflections. Similarly, your consciousness in the observer-of-observer paradox becomes an endless loop without a definitive origin or conclusion. This idea also resonates in mystical and spiritual traditions. Some philosophies talk about the dissolution of the ego, the self that identifies as I, as a form of awakening. When the ego dissolves, the separation between observer and observed fades, revealing a unified consciousness or pure awareness. The observer-of-observer loop can be seen as a metaphor for this process, where the self vanishes as a separate entity into the boundless flow of consciousness. In everyday life, this paradox plays out subtly whenever you reflect on yourself. For instance, when you think about your thoughts, you're essentially observing your mind, observing itself. This can cause a momentary break in automatic patterns, creating space for insight or change. Yet, if taken too far without grounding, it can spiral into confusion or a sense of losing oneself. Artists and filmmakers have explored this concept through mirrors, cameras, and narratives that fold back on themselves. Movies where characters watch versions of themselves, or realities within realities, highlight the eerie, unsettling feeling of infinite observation loops. These stories invite us to confront the fragility of identity and the complex layers of self-awareness. To bring this full circle, the observer-of-observer paradox asks us, what is the self if it is always watching and being watched? If every layer of observation adds another watcher, where does it end? The unsettling answer is that it doesn't. Instead, it becomes a circle, a feedback loop that swallows the individual observer into a collective mirror. The you who once felt solid and separate begins to dissolve into this infinite reflection. Yet, within this dissolution lies a profound freedom. When the boundaries between observer and observed blur, the rigid sense of I loosens. You glimpse a reality where separation is an illusion, and consciousness flows freely, interconnected and infinite. This is both the paradox and the possibility. In losing the self as a fixed point, you gain access to a vast, interconnected awareness beyond the ordinary. So, the next time you catch yourself watching your own thoughts or actions, pause and consider. Who is observing? And who is being observed? You might find yourself caught in the feedback loop, but also on the edge of a profound insight that the observer and the observed are, in the deepest sense, one and the same. In this endless dance of watching and being watched, the self vanishes, but consciousness endures, rippling through the infinite mirrors of perception. The observer of the observer is not just a paradox, it is a doorway into the profound mystery of existence itself. Puzzle with no edge. Imagine holding a puzzle in your hands, one that beckons you with its incomplete picture and scattered pieces. You start fitting one piece to another, eager to see the whole come to life. Yet, something strange begins to unfold. Each piece you place reveals a smaller puzzle embedded within it, an identical miniature of the original, but somehow more intricate, more complex, more impossible to finish. You look closer, and inside that tiny puzzle, you find even tinier pieces forming another, even smaller puzzle. This cycle repeats endlessly. The puzzle has no edge, no final piece, no moment of completion. It is a fractal maze, a looping enigma that pulls you deeper the more you try to solve it. This paradox, which we call the puzzle with no edge, is more than just a mind game. It is a metaphor for infinite regress, a concept that haunts philosophy, mathematics, and even our understanding of reality itself. Infinite regress occurs when an explanation or a process continually refers back to a prior step without end. The puzzle you hold is a physical manifestation of this endless loop, a structure that refuses closure and defies the human craving for completion. Think of it this way. You begin assembling a jigsaw, but each piece is a gateway into a smaller, identical jigsaw. No matter how meticulously you fit the pieces, you never reach the final picture because there is always a smaller puzzle beneath. This phenomenon mirrors classic philosophical dilemmas, such as the question, what caused the cause, or the problem of who created the creator. Each answer demands a further answer, and so on ad infinitum. To understand the gravity of this paradox, consider the famous example of the Droste effect in art, a recursive image where a picture contains a smaller version of itself, which contains an even smaller version, and so forth. The Droste effect visually illustrates the infinite zoom, but the puzzle with no edge is even more profound, because it isn't just about visual recursion. It's about the very structure of seeking meaning or closure in something that inherently denies it. In practical terms, this puzzle represents situations in our lives where solutions feel perpetually out of reach. It's like trying to answer why in a conversation with a curious child. Each answer invites another why until the chain of questioning spirals into a loop without a definitive end. The puzzle's endless smaller versions symbolize this infinite chain of inquiry, where every resolution births a deeper question and no final answer exists. Mathematically, this kind of infinite nesting is akin to fractals, structures exhibiting self-similarity at every scale. Fractals can be observed in nature, the branching of trees, the rugged outlines of coastlines, or the intricate patterns of snowflakes. These patterns, no matter how deeply you zoom in, repeat the same motifs. The puzzle with no edge extends this principle into the realm of human cognition and existential inquiry, suggesting that some puzzles of understanding might be infinite in nature. Another analogy lies in the concept of turtles all the way down, a humorous yet philosophical illustration about infinite regress. The story tells of a person explaining that the world rests on the back of a giant turtle. When asked what that turtle stands on, the reply is another turtle, and beneath that, another, and so on, endlessly. The puzzle with no edge encapsulates this same idea, but instead of turtles, it is pieces of a puzzle, and instead of physical support, it is the search for meaning and completion. But why does this paradox grip us so intensely? Humans have an innate desire for closure, for understanding the whole picture. We seek final answers, concrete ends, and definitive truths. The puzzle with no edge challenges this instinct, forcing us to confront the possibility that some questions might be fundamentally unanswerable, that some structures of thought or existence have no final piece. It evokes a mixture of awe, frustration, and even existential anxiety. Yet, there is beauty in this endless puzzle. It invites humility in the face of complexity. It reminds us that knowledge is not always a staircase with a final destination, but sometimes a spiral staircase, ever descending or ascending, yet never arriving at a last step. It encourages a mindset not of frustration, but of curiosity, of accepting the journey rather than demanding the destination. For example, consider scientific inquiry. Every discovery opens new questions. The more we learn about the universe, the more mysteries emerge. What lies beyond the observable cosmos? What is the nature of consciousness? These questions, much like the puzzle with no edge, resist final closure. Instead, they push us to explore deeper and deeper layers, each answer unfolding more puzzles beneath. The puzzle also resonates with concepts in quantum physics and cosmology, where reality itself may be layered in ways beyond current comprehension. Could the universe be a nested structure, with realities within realities? The puzzle with no edge invites us to entertain such possibilities, stretching the boundaries of imagination and understanding. In art and literature, this paradox has inspired countless narratives, stories within stories, dreams within dreams, realities folded into each other. Works like Inception or Borges's writings explore this motif, challenging our perceptions of what is real and what is illusion. The puzzle symbolizes the layers of consciousness and the elusive quest for absolute truth. Ultimately, the puzzle with no edge serves as a profound reminder. Some problems and questions are inherently infinite. Instead of despairing, we can embrace this infinite complexity as a fundamental characteristic of existence and thought. By recognizing the impossibility of ultimate completion, we open ourselves to infinite exploration, perpetual wonder, and endless curiosity. So, next time you pick up a puzzle, imagine it folding into itself, each piece containing a smaller world, each solution birthing a new question, stretching infinitely inward. It is not a failure of the puzzle to resist completion, but a revelation of the profound mysteries that underlie reality, knowledge, and the human mind itself. The edge you seek may never come, and that edgelessness is the puzzle's greatest secret. The oracle who asked. You walk into a quiet room, expecting answers, guidance, clarity. Sitting there is a prophet, a figure wrapped in mystery, her eyes deep pools reflecting knowledge far beyond ordinary reach. She speaks with authority, sharing truths that feel like they ripple through time itself. Her voice carries certainty, a resonance that makes you believe she holds the keys to the unknown, the future, and the hidden meanings of your life. You listen intently, hanging on every word, as if each phrase untangles the knot of your existence. But then, one day, something shifts. You find yourself again in that sacred space, and this time you see the prophet not dispensing wisdom, but asking questions. Not to adults, not to strangers, but to a small child, innocent and curious. The questions are deep, probing, like echoes of the same riddles you once hoped she would solve for you. As your eyes settle on the child, a chilling realization dawns. The child is you. Your younger self, sitting there in silent wonder, absorbing the very questions that shaped your journey. This revelation fractures the certainty you once felt. If the prophet, once a font of answers, is now asking questions to you as a child, then what does it say about the nature of knowledge itself? Is wisdom something given, or is it a circle that loops back upon itself, an endless dialogue between the seeker and the seer? The oracle who once answered is also the one who questions, and you are both, the child and the prophet, the questioner and the answered. Philosophers have long pondered the paradox of prophecy and knowledge. In ancient traditions, oracles spoke truths veiled in riddles, forcing listeners to confront mysteries within themselves. The very act of asking questions is an admission that certainty is elusive. The oracle's role is not just to reveal fate, but to provoke reflection, to ignite the fire of inquiry that burns within the soul. In your mind, this loop rewinds and fast-forwards simultaneously. You realize the questions you have been carrying, perhaps unconsciously, have always been with you. The prophet's wisdom is not a destination, but a process, a journey from innocence through questioning toward understanding, which itself circles back to new questions. The child you once were is the origin and the destination of this quest. This paradox reflects a fundamental truth about human consciousness. We are born into a world of unknowns, seeking answers that may never fully come. Our lives unfold as an interplay between the questions we ask and the answers we receive, a dance that shapes our identity. The oracle who asks reminds us that wisdom is not static, but dynamic, an evolving conversation that spans time and self. Consider how memory and identity intertwine in this loop. The child and the prophet share the same soul across time, blurring boundaries between past and present, seeker and guide. This challenges the linear notion of time and selfhood. You are both the student and the teacher, the puzzle and the solver, locked in a feedback loop of awakening. In many spiritual traditions, this circularity symbolizes the unity of all things, the oneness where beginnings and endings dissolve. The oracle's questions posed to her younger self suggest that enlightenment is not an external gift, but an internal awakening. It is a call to recognize that the mysteries you chase are already inside you, waiting to be faced. The experience can feel unsettling, as it unsettles the foundation of certainty. You begin to understand that answers given without questions are incomplete, and questions without answers are invitations rather than dead ends. The oracle's paradox is a mirror to your own existence, a reminder that life itself is a question, and we are its perpetual inquirers. This deep revelation invites a transformation of perspective. Instead of seeking fixed truths outside, you learn to embrace the fluidity of knowing and unknowing. You realize that the child's innocent curiosity and the prophet's wise questioning are two faces of the same essence. Both are necessary, both are sacred. So when you next meet a guide or a prophet, listen closely, not just to their answers, but to the questions they carry. Because sometimes the greatest wisdom lies not in certainty, but in the courage to ask, to wonder, and to continue seeking. The oracle who asked is a timeless reminder. The path of wisdom is not a line, but a circle, and you are both the traveler and the destination. Masks beneath the mask. You reach up and peel off your mask, but beneath it, there's another mask. Almost identical, yet subtly different. You pull that away, hoping to find something real underneath. A genuine face, a true self. Yet, what you uncover is not the authentic you, but another layer of disguise, and then another. The process repeats endlessly, like an infinite game of peeling an onion with no core. This experience is unsettling because it touches on a universal human quest, the search for identity. We assume there's a real fixed self beneath the surface, a face that defines who we truly are. But what if that face doesn't exist? What if our sense of self is nothing but a series of roles, masks, and performances layered one on top of another? Each mask is an identity we wear to navigate the world. Student, friend, sibling, professional, but none of them fully capture the essence we seek. The metaphor of masks beneath masks speaks to how deeply we construct our identities through social roles and expectations. From early childhood, we learn to adapt, to fit, to perform. These adaptations become masks, sometimes protective, sometimes limiting, that we carry throughout life. When we try to strip them away, we often find more layers, not less. The real me seems to remain elusive, like a mirage that shifts whenever we approach. Psychology calls this the self as a narrative, a story we tell ourselves about who we are. This narrative is composed of memories, beliefs, desires, fears, and the impressions of others. But a story is not the storyteller. The person who tells the story is not contained in the story itself. Similarly, the real you is not found in the masks or identities you assume, but perhaps in the space beyond them. Consider the masks we wear daily: the polite smile in public, the confident facade in meetings, the caring parent at home. Each mask serves a purpose, a function. They are survival tools and social glue. Yet, when alone and quiet, we may question, who am I beneath these roles? The stripping away becomes a desperate attempt to meet the unmasked self. But what if the self is not a static entity waiting to be revealed? What if the self is the act of removing the masks itself? The process, the movement, the questioning, is that the real core? Instead of searching for a final, stable face, perhaps our true nature lies in the constant unfolding, the dynamic dance of identity. Philosophy and spirituality have long explored this idea. The concept of no self in Buddhism teaches that the self is an illusion. There is no permanent I, only a flux of changing experiences and sensations. The masks are real, but the fixed self behind them is not. This is not a cause for despair, but an invitation to freedom. If there is no final mask to remove, then the anxiety of finding a true self dissolves. This realization can be both liberating and disorienting. Without a fixed identity, you are free to flow, to adapt, to change. You become an artist, painting your existence moment by moment, rather than a statue carved once and for all. But it also means embracing uncertainty and letting go of the need for certainty about who you are. Imagine standing before a mirror, removing a mask after mask, but instead of searching for a face, you begin to appreciate the act itself, the movement, the courage to face the unknown, the willingness to be vulnerable. The mask peeling becomes a meditation on impermanence and self-inquiry. This ongoing process reflects the human condition. We are always becoming, never finished. Each mask dropped reveals not emptiness, but possibility, the chance to reinvent, to discover new facets of our being. The real you is not hidden behind masks. It is the experience of mask removal itself. In relationships, this idea plays out vividly. We present masks to others, sometimes to protect, sometimes to impress. Yet, genuine connection often arises when masks fall away, and vulnerability emerges. But vulnerability is also a mask of its own, a mask of honesty and openness. The dance continues. Neuroscience offers another perspective. The brain constructs the self as a model, integrating sensory input, memories, and emotions into a coherent experience. This model is not static. It updates continuously. So, the self is more like a dynamic narrative, a story told and retold, rather than a fixed character. The masks beneath masks metaphor reveals the paradox of identity. It is simultaneously real and unreal, fixed and fluid, known and unknowable. The real self you seek might be less a face, and more the continuous process of becoming aware, questioning, peeling, and embracing the layers of your existence. So, next time you find yourself removing a mask, notice the feeling. Is it frustration, hope, curiosity? Allow yourself to dwell in the space where the search happens. Recognize that the act of removing masks is itself a profound expression of self-awareness. In the end, the absence of a fixed face beneath the masks is not a void, but a space of infinite potential. It invites you to live authentically in the present, not clinging to a false identity, but dancing gracefully with the endless unfolding of who you are. You are not a mask. You are the unmasking. Cause behind the cause. You flip a switch and a light turns on. At first glance, it seems simple. Cause and effect. You push the switch. Electricity flows. The bulb glows. But then, a deeper question arises. What caused that cause to cause? What is behind the logic that makes the switch turn on the light? If every effect must have a cause, then what is the origin of that first cause? This is the mystery of cause behind the cause, the paradox where the logic seems to devour itself, and certainty slips through our fingers like smoke. To understand this, consider the way we naturally think about the world. Our minds are wired to see chains of cause and effect everywhere. Rain causes the ground to get wet. A seed causes a tree to grow. The sun causes the day to begin. But this chain always presupposes a beginning, a first cause that itself does not require a cause. Without such an origin, the chain loops endlessly backward, leaving us trapped in an infinite regress. Yet, when we try to identify this first cause, the logic that defines it dissolves into confusion. Take the example of a simple machine, a clock. The hands move because of gears turning inside. The gears turn because of springs winding down. The springs are wound because someone set the clock. But what set the clock? And what set that cause? Tracing backwards in time, we arrive at a point where cause and effect seem to lose their meaning. The clock is part of a universe where laws of physics dictate behavior, but then the question surfaces. What caused those laws to be the way they are? Who or what set the logic in motion? This is more than an abstract puzzle. It challenges the very foundation of knowledge and existence. Science, philosophy, and theology all wrestle with this question. In physics, the Big Bang is considered the origin of our universe. But what caused the Big Bang? Some theories propose quantum fluctuations in a vacuum, but what caused those fluctuations? The logic consumes itself, spiraling inward without an obvious anchor. Consider the concept of causality itself, the principle that every effect must have a cause. This is foundational for rational thinking and the scientific method. But when we ask about the cause of causality, we enter a realm where cause may no longer apply as we understand it. If cause is a law, then what caused the law? If cause is a pattern, what generated the pattern? This is a paradox where the logic folds back on itself, seemingly eating its own tail. One way to grasp this is through analogy. Imagine a game of dominoes arranged in a line. When you push the first domino, all the others fall in sequence, each one caused by the fall of the previous. But what caused the first domino to fall? If it was pushed by a hand, then who or what moved the hand? And if that is also caused, tracing back becomes a quest without end. If the domino chain has no first push, it simply cannot start falling. But if there is a first push, the cause behind it remains a mystery. Some philosophers argue that the first cause must be uncaused, an exception to the rule that everything has a cause. This uncaused cause is often equated with concepts of God, prime mover, or foundational reality. Yet this introduces new questions. How can something exist without a cause? How can logic itself permit an exception to its own principle? The cause behind the cause resists comprehension. In modern physics, the problem remains. The laws governing particles and forces seem fundamental, but their existence is unexplained. Some physicists propose a multiverse, where countless universes exist with varying laws. If so, the cause behind our universe's cause lies beyond our observable cosmos. But this shifts the mystery rather than solves it. The cause behind the cause remains elusive, a shadow at the edge of understanding. Even in everyday life, we confront echoes of this paradox. When we ask why we behave a certain way, we might say it is caused by genetics, environment, or choice. But what caused those factors? When did the logic of our existence begin? Is there a point where cause and effect break down and something simply is? This is the haunting question that drives philosophy and introspection. This looping paradox has been explored through the ages. Aristotle introduced the idea of the unmoved mover, a being that causes motion without itself being moved. In religious traditions, this concept is often linked to a divine creator. Yet, from a strictly logical standpoint, this may feel like an unsatisfying stopgap, a way to end the regress by fiat rather than explanation. Another approach is to challenge the very assumptions about causality. Quantum mechanics, for instance, reveals a universe where cause and effect blur. Particles exist in states of probability, and events can occur without deterministic causes. This suggests that the cause behind the cause may not obey classical logic at all, opening doors to a reality beyond our intuitive understanding. The logic eating itself is like a snake biting its own tail, the Ouroboros, a symbol of eternal cyclicality and self-reflexivity. The principle of cause and effect appears robust, but when questioned at the root, it becomes self-consuming. This is not a failure, but a profound sign of the limits of human reason. It teaches us humility before the mysteries of existence. Understanding this paradox is vital, because it shapes how we think about reality, knowledge, and meaning. It challenges the belief in absolute certainty and invites openness to mystery. It shows that the foundation of our understanding may rest on principles that cannot themselves be fully explained. So, what can we do with this knowledge? We can embrace the paradox, allowing it to inspire wonder rather than frustration. We can acknowledge that some questions may remain forever open, and that seeking answers is itself part of the human journey. The cause behind the cause may never be fully grasped, but the quest to understand it pushes us to expand the horizons of thought. In the end, flipping a switch and seeing a light glow is a marvel, a simple act connected to vast mysteries. The cause behind the cause is a reminder that beneath every certainty lies a deeper unknown, waiting to be explored, pondered, and respected. The logic eats itself, yes, but from that consuming spiral emerges the infinite dance of inquiry, the heartbeat of existence itself. This infinite regress is not a barrier, but a gateway. It teaches us that not every chain needs a beginning, that some truths exist beyond cause, and that the essence of being may be found in the paradox itself. The light turning on is more than electricity flowing. It is the illumination of mystery shining through the fabric of reality. Thus, the cause behind the cause remains the ultimate enigma, a question that turns the mind inward and outward, forever challenging the boundaries of logic and perception. It invites us to live with questions as companions, to dance with uncertainty, and to celebrate the vast, unfathomable wonder at the heart of existence. This is the profound truth hidden behind the simple act of flipping a switch, the infinite looping mystery of cause itself. Candlelit by shadow. A candle flickers in a cave, its fragile light dancing on the rough stone walls, casting long shadows that seem to pulse and breathe. You move closer, drawn by the warm glow, expecting to find the source, a flame fueled by wax and wick. But as you peer deeper into the darkness, the light's origin confounds you. The candle's flame appears to be lit, not by the spark of fire, but by the shadow of another candle, an impossible candle that doesn't exist anywhere in the cave. It's as if the shadow itself holds the secret flame, a paradox of illumination born from absence rather than presence. This strange phenomenon invites you into a realm where light and dark, presence and absence, reality and illusion intertwine. Shadows are traditionally understood as the absence of light, a dark imprint where light cannot reach. Yet here, the shadow seems to be the source of light itself. This reversal unsettles our basic assumptions about how the world works and compels us to question the nature of perception and existence. Imagine the candle's shadow as an unseen force, a phantom flame igniting the visible candle's glow. It is a metaphor for hidden causes, unseen influences that animate what we think we understand. In life, many things seem to exist only because of their shadows, echoes of truths concealed behind appearances, energies fueled by absence rather than presence, like a memory that lights up a forgotten corner of the mind, or a fear that shapes a decision without being fully visible. Philosophically, this paradox challenges the binary between light and dark, existence and non-existence. It invites us to consider that shadows are not mere voids, but can be active participants in reality. The idea that a candle's flame could be sustained by a shadow suggests a world where opposites are not separate but entwined, each defining and creating the other in a continuous dance. In physics, light behaves in ways that defy simple explanation. Quantum phenomena reveal particles existing in states of superposition, neither here nor there until observed. The candle lit by a shadow evokes a similar mystery, an effect emerging from what seems like a negation, a presence arising from an absence. This flickering flame, born from nothing tangible, speaks to the mind's capacity to find meaning in paradox. It reminds us that reality is not always straightforward, and that sometimes the things that don't seem to exist are the very sources that illuminate our path. Following the candle's light becomes a journey into the heart of uncertainty, a quest to reconcile what we see with what cannot be seen. The shadow that lights the flame is a riddle without answer, a symbol of the invisible forces that shape our world and our understanding. As you stand in the cave watching the candle flicker, you realize that the true light may come not from what is present, but from what is hidden, an intangible shadow that defies logic yet fuels the flame. The candle lit by shadow is a profound metaphor for the mysteries that lie beneath the surface, urging us to look beyond appearances and embrace the enigmatic nature of existence itself. The dice that rolled itself. You roll a die. The small cube tumbles through the air, spinning unpredictably, a symbol of chance and randomness. But what if the result you see, the number facing up, is not just a random outcome, but a pre-existing fact? What if, somewhere else, another version of you is rolling the exact same die, performing the same motion, and producing the identical result? Not once, but eternally, as if the dice itself has no free will, but is trapped in an infinite loop of repeating its own outcome, mirrored across multiple realities. This is the enigma of the dice that rolled itself, a paradox that delves into the nature of reality, fate, and the illusion of choice. At first glance, rolling a die seems the purest act of randomness, a moment where the future unfolds unpredictably. Each toss carries the thrill of possibility, the suspense of chance. Yet, when we begin to question the nature of that randomness, we uncover unsettling layers. What does it truly mean for something to be random? If the universe operates on deterministic principles beneath the surface, can randomness exist at all? The dice that rolled itself challenges our deepest assumptions about chance, time, and selfhood by suggesting that every roll, every outcome, already exists somewhere, mirrored and synchronized in ways that defy linear causality. Imagine a multiverse, a vast collection of parallel realities, each differing in subtle or profound ways. In one reality, you roll a die and get a 4. In another, a version of you rolls the same die and also gets a 4. But these aren't independent events. They are reflections of the same occurrence, echoing through infinite worlds. The die's roll is not random, but predetermined by the intertwined fabric of these realities. Your action and its outcome are mirrored by infinite counterparts, forming an unbroken loop of cause and effect, stretching beyond our perception. This concept finds echoes in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. According to this interpretation, every quantum event spawns multiple universes, each containing a different possible outcome. The dice roll, then, exists simultaneously across countless branches, each outcome realized somewhere. Yet, the dice that rolled itself intensifies this idea. Rather than diverging outcomes, the die's motion and result replicate identically across realities. It suggests a synchronization, a cosmic echo, where randomness collapses into repetition. The implications are profound. If the die's roll is mirrored endlessly, does your choice in the act of rolling carry any weight? Is free will an illusion, replaced by an eternal dance of replicas executing the same motion? This evokes questions about identity and agency. If multiple versions of yourself enact the same choices, who is the true you? Are you an individual or part of a vast network of selves bound by inevitability? Consider the philosophical debate surrounding determinism versus free will. Determinism holds that all events, including human actions, are caused by preceding events, governed by laws of nature. Free will, on the other hand, argues for the capacity to make genuine choices unbound by causality. The dice that rolled itself challenges this dichotomy by revealing a scenario where free will seems present, rolling the die, yet the outcome is fixed across parallel existences. It blurs the boundary, implying that even acts appearing spontaneous are woven into a predetermined pattern replicated endlessly. An example closer to everyday life might be a person deciding what to eat for breakfast. Suppose there are countless versions of that person, each making the same choice, influenced by identical conditions, tastes, and thoughts. Their choices, while appearing free, may be mirrored infinitely, hinting at an underlying order. The die is a more dramatic symbol of this pattern, encapsulating chance yet seemingly bound by fate. This paradox also aligns with the concept of causal loops in time travel theories. In causal loops, events are both causes and effects of each other, creating a closed temporal cycle. The dice roll's result existing before you even roll, it resembles a causal loop, where cause and effect entwine in a loop, erasing traditional notions of time's arrow. In neuroscience, experiments demonstrate that decisions are often made in the brain milliseconds before we consciously recognize them. This suggests our feeling of free choice is a post hoc narrative. The dice that rolled itself echoes this unsettling discovery, hinting that even the randomness we trust may be scripted beneath conscious awareness. But beyond scientific and philosophical weight, the paradox resonates emotionally. Imagine the eerie feeling of rolling a die and knowing its result is already written, that the tension of chance is a grand illusion. This challenges how we perceive control, fate, and existence itself. Are we actors improvising on an infinite stage, or are we repeating a predetermined script in countless theaters? Art and literature have long explored such themes. Stories of doppelgangers, mirrored realities, and fate-bound characters tap into this mystery. The die that rolls itself is a metaphor for the human condition, caught between the desire for autonomy and the haunting sense of predestination. Yet, within this paradox lies a strange freedom. Recognizing that outcomes may be predetermined across infinite realities doesn't necessarily diminish the richness of experience. Instead, it invites us to embrace the moment, to find meaning not in control over the future, but in awareness of the eternal dance of existence. The dice that rolled itself invites us to reconsider randomness, free will, and identity. It shows us that what feels unpredictable might be the echo of an endless cosmic symmetry, where every roll is both new and eternal, both choice and inevitability. It challenges us to look deeper into the fabric of reality, where dice don't just fall, they roll themselves, endlessly reflecting across the infinite mirrors of existence. So, next time you pick up a die, remember, the roll you see might be just one face of an eternal motion, a ripple across parallel selves, a dance choreographed beyond time. In that realization, mystery deepens, and the line between chance and destiny blurs into an endless, fascinating enigma. The author of authors. You pick up a book, expecting a story, characters, plot, beginnings, and endings. But what you find is something far more intricate, a story about a writer writing a book. Then, that book contains another story, about a writer writing a book, who in turn is writing a book about a writer writing a book. It's a layered narrative, folding in on itself like a fractal, a loop that spirals inward with no clear boundary. Each writer revises the text, crafted by the previous one, editing, reshaping, reimagining the same story again and again. This recursive cycle is mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. Imagine the first writer putting down the very first word, beginning the tale, but soon, a second writer appears within the pages, rewriting that story, crafting a new narrative that references the first writer's work. Then, another writer emerges inside that story, editing the last version. The act of creation folds infinitely inward, an endless chain of writers and books, each one rewriting the last. The text becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting itself endlessly, each version alive and changing, a fluid narrative that resists any fixed origin. This raises a profound and haunting question. Who wrote the first word? If every version edits the last, tracing backward through layers of text, can there be an original author? Or is the entire narrative an infinite loop with no true beginning, a cycle of creation without origin? The question itself is a paradox, a Mobius strip of authorship twisting in on itself. Philosophers and thinkers have long been fascinated by such paradoxes of self-reference and infinite regress. Douglas Hofstadter, in his groundbreaking work Gödel, Escher, Bach, calls these phenomena strange loops where systems fold back upon themselves, creating complexity, consciousness, and self-awareness from recursive patterns. The story of an author writing about an author writing a book is a perfect metaphor for this strange loop. It reflects the mind thinking about itself, a narrative folding infinitely inward. Think about literature's embrace of metafiction, where stories consciously acknowledge their own fictionality, breaking the fourth wall to challenge the reader's perception. Books like Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, or Jorge Luis Borges's Labyrinthine Tales play with nested narratives, layers of reality, and the unstable nature of authorship. They ask us to question what it means to write, to create, and to be created. In this recursive narrative, the traditional roles of author and reader blur and dissolve. Every writer in the story is simultaneously creator and creation, both shaping and shaped by the text. The boundaries between origin and reflection vanish. The text becomes a living entity, endlessly evolving through its own layers. This is not just a literary puzzle, but a reflection of how consciousness itself may function. Human thought often loops. Our minds reflect on themselves, producing thoughts about thoughts, memories within memories, a self-awareness built on recursive cognition. The self is a story that tells itself, an endless dialogue of identity and meaning. Consider a practical example. The act of writing itself is recursive. An author drafts a sentence, then rereads it, edits, rewrites, each revision a new version shaped by the previous one. When multiple authors collaborate, or when a writer rewrites their own work repeatedly, the narrative becomes layered, a palimpsest of voices and intentions. But what if this process extended infinitely, with each version rewriting the last, and so on forever? In computer science, this resembles recursive functions, processes that call themselves repeatedly until a base case is reached. But what if the base case doesn't exist? What if the process spirals infinitely, never resolving? That's the essence of the author of authors paradox. It defies linear time, defies simple causality. The question, who wrote the first word, dissolves into itself. The first word is both origin and effect, cause and consequence, beginning and continuation. It's a question without an answer, an invitation to contemplate the nature of creation, identity, and existence itself. This paradox also echoes ancient philosophical dilemmas, like the chicken or the egg question, which challenges linear notions of cause and effect. The author of authors problem magnifies this to a cosmic scale of storytelling and self-reference, where each layer depends on the other, and no single starting point can be found. And yet, this infinite recursion is not merely a problem to be solved, but a lens to understand deeper truths. It suggests that creation is not a simple origin, but a process, a living, breathing cycle of reinterpretation, reflection, and renewal. Stories are not static. They evolve through their tellers and readers, through time and perspective. In a way, every story we tell about ourselves is an author of authors scenario. We write our own narratives, revisit past memories, reinterpret experiences, and in doing so, constantly rewrite our identities. The first word of who we are becomes elusive, replaced by layers upon layers of meaning and self-reflection. So, as you contemplate this paradox, embrace its mystery. Let it remind you that creation is complex and layered, that every act of writing or making is part of an ongoing conversation with the past and the future. The author of authors is not a singular figure, but the infinite interplay of stories, minds, and moments. In this endless recursion, the story continues, forever writing, forever rewritten, forever alive. And you, as the reader and the thinker, are part of this loop, both observer and participant in the infinite dance of words and meaning. The eye that sees itself. You look out into the world, your eyes absorbing light, shapes, colors, and motion. Your eyes are windows, capturing the vastness beyond you, the bustling streets, the quiet trees, the faces of others. This act of seeing feels natural, effortless, and clear. But then, imagine turning your gaze inward, trying to see the very eye that sees. What happens then? The clarity begins to fracture. The simple act of observation turns complex, strange, almost hallucinatory. The eye that sees itself is a paradox. Normally, vision is about an external object reflecting light into your eyes, creating images in your brain. But how can your eye see itself when it has no external reference? There is no external image of your eye to observe from its own perspective. It's like trying to look at your own retina without a mirror, a visual loop with no clear resolution. When the eye attempts to observe itself, the process becomes recursive. Vision folds back onto vision, creating layers of perception stacked inside one another. This recursion doesn't produce a stable image. It produces a hallucination, a shimmering fractal of seeing that repeats endlessly. Your eye, trying to understand itself, creates a mirage, a vision that builds from visions, a simulation within a simulation. This concept is mirrored in many philosophical and scientific explorations of consciousness. How does the mind observe itself? When your awareness turns inward, you are both the observer and the observed. This reflexive loop is central to self-awareness, yet it also creates complexity, confusion, and paradox. Think of a camera pointed at its own screen. The feedback loop produces swirling images, patterns that warp and fold. Your eye's attempt to see itself is similar. There is no fixed image, only an evolving cascade of reflections and distortions. This is the fracturing of vision, where seeing becomes not just observation, but creation. In neuroscience, this recursive process is linked to how the brain constructs reality. Your perception isn't just a passive reception of light. It's an active process where your brain fills in gaps, predicts patterns, and creates a coherent world from fragments. When you turn this process inward, the brain attempts to model its own functions, generating recursive loops that challenge the boundaries of what is real. The hallucination here isn't a failure or error. It's the eye and mind revealing their fundamental nature, self-generating and self-referential. Your consciousness is like a hall of mirrors, endlessly reflecting itself back and forth. The eye that sees itself isn't a fixed point of clarity, but a dynamic, fractal dance of perception, creating perception. This idea also touches on the mystical and spiritual. Some traditions describe enlightenment or awakening as realizing this loop, becoming aware of the observer observing. The separation between subject and object dissolves. You realize the I and the seen are one and the same, intertwined in an infinite feedback. But this realization can be disorienting. The familiar world, once solid and separate, becomes fluid and intertwined with the observer's own presence. The fracturing of vision is not a loss, but a transformation, an opening to a deeper, more complex understanding of consciousness. Imagine now closing your eyes but still seeing with your mind's eye. The image is no longer formed by light, but by neural activity, by imagination. This inner vision can fracture and multiply, much like the eye trying to see itself. It's a hallucinatory process where reality and imagination blur. So, the next time you try to look at your own eye, remember this paradox. The eye that sees itself is not a fixed image to be found, but a process to be experienced. It is vision creating vision, perception generating perception, awareness becoming aware of itself in a fractal, recursive dance. You are both the watcher and the watched, the eye and the reflection, the creator and the creation. This is the fracturing and the miracle of self-observation, the loop before time. There is a loop outside time itself. This loop moves before time begins, a spiraling causality that exists beyond cause and effect as we understand them. It is a paradox that stretches the limits of human imagination, a realm where the very fabric of time, the sequence of events, and the idea of cause lose their meaning. To grasp this concept is to peer into the abyss of existence before the universe unfurled, before moments ticked forward, and before reality as we know it took shape. When we think about time, we imagine a line flowing forward, seconds, minutes, years, marching onward without pause. We see cause and effect arranged neatly in a sequence. One event leads to the next, forming a chain that explains everything. But what if there was a loop outside this timeline, a spiral existing before time began? This is not just a theoretical curiosity. It challenges our deepest assumptions about reality, causality, and existence. To understand this, imagine the universe at its very beginning. The Big Bang Theory tells us that time and space emerge together from an initial singularity, a point where conventional physics breaks down. But what happened before that moment? If time itself began at the Big Bang, then before is a concept that loses meaning. Yet some ideas suggest a causality spiral, a loop that pre-exists time, causing it to emerge from this cyclical motion. Consider the paradox of cause and effect when applied to this pre-time loop. In our everyday world, causes always precede effects, but in a loop existing outside time, cause and effect become intertwined and indistinguishable. The spiral folds in on itself, so that the effect feeds back into the cause in an eternal cycle. This is not linear causality, but circular causality, a self-sustaining movement with no beginning or end. Examples of this concept appear in both physics and philosophy. In physics, certain models of the universe, like those involving closed time-like curves, propose that time can loop back on itself, creating scenarios where an event causes itself. This defies the usual cause-effect structure and hints at a more complex temporal reality beyond our experience. Philosophically, this loop challenges our concept of origin. If everything must have a cause, what caused the first cause? The loop before time offers an answer. There is no first cause, only an eternal, self-referential cycle. The universe, or whatever underlies it, might be caught in this infinite loop, perpetually generating itself without a clear starting point. To grasp this, imagine the Ouroboros, the ancient symbol of a snake biting its own tail, representing eternity and cyclicality. The loop before time is like this symbol writ large across the cosmos, a self-consuming, self-creating cycle that defies linear explanation. The logic of beginnings and ends collapses into a spiral where cause and effect lose their separate identities. In our daily lives, time feels linear and irreversible. We remember the past but cannot see the future. Causality seems fixed. Yet, at the deepest level, the universe may operate according to principles that transcend this intuition. Quantum mechanics already shows us that particles can exist in superposition, states where cause and effect blur. The loop before time may be a macrocosmic extension of these quantum mysteries. This raises profound questions. If time and causality are emergent phenomena from this loop, what does that say about free will, existence, and reality? Are we merely players in a cosmic dance choreographed by a causality spiral beyond our perception? Does the loop suggest that reality is fundamentally cyclical, infinite, and self-generating? The concept is difficult because it challenges the very tools we use to understand the world. Logic, language, and thought depend on linearity and temporality. Talking about a loop outside time requires stepping beyond these frameworks, embracing paradox and mystery. It forces us to accept that some truths may lie beyond human comprehension. Yet this loop is not just a theoretical abstraction. It has implications for how we understand existence. If the universe arises from an eternal causality spiral, then creation is not a singular event, but an ongoing process. Time, space, and matter continuously emerge and dissolve in this cycle, an endless flow without a beginning or end. This perspective is echoed in many spiritual traditions. Ideas of eternal return, cycles of rebirth, and cosmic dance reflect a recognition of reality as cyclical and infinite. The loop before time aligns with these ancient intuitions, now reframed through the lens of modern science and philosophy. To truly contemplate the loop before time, we must silence the mind's urge for neat answers and open ourselves to the vastness of mystery. We must see causality not as a strict chain, but as a dance, an endless spiral weaving the fabric of existence itself. In this spiral, cause and effect entwine like dancers moving in perfect harmony, each giving rise to the other in an eternal embrace. There is no first step and no last, only the movement itself, the loop itself, the infinite spiral of being. Thus, the loop before time is not merely a paradox, but a profound invitation to expand our consciousness. It reminds us that reality is richer and more complex than linear stories allow. It calls us to embrace uncertainty, to marvel at mystery, and to recognize that existence itself may be an eternal spiral of cause, effect, and becoming. This understanding changes everything. It transforms how we see ourselves, from isolated individuals moving through time to parts of an infinite cosmic dance, flowing within a loop beyond time. The loop before time is not just a concept, but a doorway, a threshold to deeper awareness of the infinite, the eternal, and the unfathomable. In the end, The loop before time shows us that the questions we ask about beginnings, causes, and existence lead us not to an endpoint, but to an endless spiral, an eternal dance that moves beyond time, beyond cause, beyond meaning, into the heart of mystery itself. Dream within the dream. Yet you wake up. The morning light filters softly through the window, birds chirp faintly outside, and for a moment, everything feels vivid, real, just as it should. But then, as you rise and stretch, the world subtly shifts. Colors seem muted, sounds more distant, as if you are stepping into another layer, another reality, just a little less tangible than the one before. Suddenly you find yourself waking again, not from sleep, but from what you thought was waking. Each awakening pulls you deeper into a maze of realities, each one more fragile, more ephemeral, like mist slipping through your fingers. This phenomenon, waking up within a dream, blurs the boundary between dreaming and waking, casting doubt on the very notion of what is real. When does the dream end and the waking world begin? Or are these layers merely different levels of consciousness, folding over one another like the pages of a book you can never finish reading? Imagine stepping through a series of rooms, each painted with the textures of your dreams, each more surreal than the last. In one, the sky ripples like water. In another, time slows to a crawl, stretching moments into eternity. Each waking feels like an escape, but soon reveals itself as just another veil, a further illusion constructed by your mind. This recursive loop of waking up again and again echoes ancient stories and myths of false awakenings, where the sleeper believes they are free only to realize they remain trapped within the dream. These experiences can be disorienting, even terrifying, because they dissolve the anchor of certainty. If every awakening is just another layer of dreaming, then what is the real world? Is it the first waking moment you had? Or is it lost forever in the shifting sands of consciousness? Psychologically, such experiences reveal the fluidity of our perception and the fragile foundations upon which our sense of reality stands. Dreams are often seen as the mind's playground, a space where thoughts, fears, and desires mingle without the constraints of logic. But when dreams nest inside dreams, they suggest that even our waking reality might be constructed from the same shifting, elusive material. Philosophers have long pondered the nature of reality and illusion. René Descartes famously questioned whether he could be certain of anything beyond his own thoughts, suspecting that all of reality might be a grand illusion. The dream within a dream is a modern echo of this doubt, a lived paradox where the fabric of existence seems to unravel before your eyes. This idea also resonates with contemporary scientific views on consciousness and simulation theory. Some propose that our perceived reality is itself a kind of simulation or constructed experience, layered and complex. If so, then waking up multiple times may symbolize peeling back layers of a vast, intricate design, each revealing new mysteries and questions. In literature and art, the dream within a dream has inspired countless stories of mystery and revelation. Edgar Allan Poe captured its eerie essence in his poem, where he mourns the fragile, fleeting nature of life and dreams alike. The motif invites us to contemplate the impermanence of our experiences and the elusive quest for truth. As you navigate these layers of waking and dreaming, you start to wonder, was the first dream the real one? Or are all your realities equally illusory, flickering like shadows cast on the walls of a cavernous mind? Perhaps reality itself is a dream, endlessly unfolding, with no final awakening in sight. The dream within a dream reminds us that certainty is fragile and that the boundaries between what we perceive as real and unreal are porous and shifting. It is an invitation to embrace mystery, to question assumptions, and to recognize that sometimes the journey through layers of consciousness is itself the profound truth we seek. In this endless dance of waking and dreaming, you are both the dreamer and the dream, forever caught in the shimmering twilight between worlds, searching, wondering, and ultimately awakening to the infinite possibilities of existence itself. DNA spiral of mind. Your thoughts feel original, unique bursts of creativity and insight that seem to arise from the depths of your mind, as if you alone hold the key to their genesis. But what if this feeling of originality is an illusion? What if every thought you have is the product of an intricate chain stretching far beyond your conscious self? a vast spiral weaving through language, culture, ancestors, and even the atoms that compose your body. When we begin to trace the roots of our mental landscape, we discover that the mind is not an isolated island, but a complex, looping web embedded in the very fabric of life itself. Consider language, the most immediate tool shaping your thoughts. Language is more than just words. It is a living archive of collective human experience. The structure and vocabulary of your native tongue influence how you perceive and conceptualize the world. For example, some languages have multiple words for colors that others group under one term, which changes how speakers discern subtle differences. Others encode concepts of time or space in ways that shape cognition fundamentally. Your thoughts are, in essence, dialogues within this inherited linguistic framework, passed down through generations. They carry echoes of the countless voices and cultures that have molded language over centuries. Language itself is a spiral of human history, coiling endlessly as it carries knowledge and worldview from one generation to the next. But language is only one layer in this genetic spiral. Culture, an intricate system of beliefs, customs, art, and social norms, is the living ecosystem where language thrives. Culture influences what you value, how you interpret events, and even which memories you hold dear. Your cultural identity is a legacy inherited from your ancestors and shaped by their lived experiences. It forms the invisible architecture of your mind, guiding how thoughts are formed and understood. Take, for instance, the concept of honor in some societies or communal responsibility in others. These cultural frameworks deeply affect the way individuals reason and make decisions. Your mind is thus a mirror reflecting not only your personal experiences, but also the countless stories, struggles, and triumphs embedded in your cultural heritage. Delving deeper, we encounter the biological roots of thought, the genetic material passed down through millennia. Your DNA encodes not just physical traits, but also subtle predispositions affecting cognition, temperament, and behavior. Though genes do not determine thoughts directly, they set the stage upon which neural circuits develop and operate. The structure of your brain, the strength of synaptic connections, the balance of neurotransmitters, all are influenced by genetics. This genetic blueprint carries the imprint of your ancestors, an unbroken chain reaching back through time. From the hunter-gatherers who first walked the earth to the philosophers who pondered existence, fragments of their biological legacy reside within you, shaping the very capacity for thought. Moreover, your mind is built from atoms and molecules forged in the crucibles of ancient stars. These elemental particles, recycled across cosmic epochs, form the neurons and synapses that enable consciousness. The complex electrochemical dance inside your brain follows physical laws as old as the universe itself. Your thoughts are, at their most fundamental level, emergent phenomena, patterns of matter and energy arranging themselves in momentary harmony. This cosmic connection reminds us that our minds are not separate from the universe, but expressions of its ongoing story. A spiral of life reaching from stardust to sentience. To illustrate this, consider the story of epigenetics, where environmental factors and life experiences can modify how genes express themselves, sometimes even across generations. This phenomenon adds a dynamic dimension to the genetic spiral of the mind, showing that not only do we inherit from our ancestors, but our own experiences may ripple forward, influencing future generations. The spiral is thus not static, but an evolving loop, constantly shaped by both heritage and environment. Philosophically, this intertwining challenges the notion of individualism. If our thoughts are the product of inherited language, culture, and biology, where does the self begin? The mind becomes a continuous loop, where personal identity merges with collective history and cosmic matter. The feeling of a unique, autonomous thinker fades into an awareness of participation in an eternal spiral, a dance of genes, ideas, and stars coalescing into consciousness. Artists and poets have long sensed this infinite loop. The double helix of DNA itself is a powerful symbol of life's continuity and complexity. In literature, motifs of spirals and loops often represent time, memory, and identity intertwining endlessly. The mind's spiral is a story told across disciplines and cultures, a universal metaphor for the interconnectedness of existence. Understanding the mind as a long genetic loop is not a negation of individuality, but an expansion of it. It invites us to see ourselves as threads in a vast tapestry, where each thought is a knot binding past, present, and future. This perspective deepens our appreciation for the mystery of consciousness and the richness of human experience. So, next time you have a thought, pause and consider its origins. Feel the echo of languages spoken long ago, the pulse of cultures lived before you, the silent guidance of ancestors encoded in your DNA, and the cosmic atoms that make your mind possible. Your thoughts are not isolated sparks, but luminous points on a spiraling helix, weaving the timeless story of life itself. The mind, then, is not simply a vessel for thoughts, but a living, breathing spiral of existence, an endless genetic loop carrying the legacy of all that has come before into the infinite unfolding of what is yet to be. The reflection that builds you. You are shaped by the eyes around you, becoming the reflection others project onto your being. This is the core of human connection, a dance between self and other, a continuous feedback loop where identity is not solitary but relational. The world sees you through a lens colored by its own expectations, desires, and biases, and you absorb that reflected image, letting it build and define who you are. But this reflection is itself an illusion. The version of you others perceive is filtered, incomplete, a shadow shaped by perspective rather than reality. It is not your whole self, but a fragment, a mask constructed by appearances and interpretations. Yet, it holds immense power, because as you see the world reacting to this projected self, you internalize it, reshaping your own identity to match the reflection staring back at you. This creates a paradox of infinite mirroring. You become who others see, but others only see the self you present, a reflection of a reflection, endlessly folding back on itself. Two illusions intertwine, each building the other in a perpetual cycle. The self you think you own is a creation born from this recursive interplay. Psychologists call this the looking glass self, a concept introduced by Charles Horton Cooley. Our sense of self develops not in isolation, but through imagining how others perceive us. We gauge ourselves by their reactions, crafting our identity in response to their reflected judgments. Yet, the mirror is imperfect, distorted by assumptions and projections. This dynamic reveals how fragile and fluid identity truly is. It's not a fixed essence, but a living mosaic, constantly shaped by social feedback. Every glance, every word, every gesture from others becomes a brick in the structure of who you become. But the foundation remains elusive, because the self that others see is a partial, filtered image. In literature and philosophy, this theme recurs endlessly. Think of mirrors and reflections as symbols of identity's duality. The self is both subject and object, actor and audience, creator and creation. The infinite reflections remind us that who we are is inseparable from how we are seen, and yet, that vision is always a partial truth. Consider how social media amplifies this effect today. Profiles and personas become curated reflections crafted to shape others' perceptions, which then feed back into our self-concept. We perform identities that are both authentic and constructed, constantly edited in response to an ever-watching audience. The mirror becomes a screen, and identity a fluid performance. This recursive reflection challenges the notion of a stable, intrinsic self. Instead, it suggests that identity emerges in relation, a collaborative creation between you and the world. The I is not solitary, but dialogic, formed through endless exchange and mutual shaping. Yet, within this complexity lies possibility. Awareness of this interplay grants freedom, the freedom to choose which reflections to accept and which to reject. By understanding that others' perceptions are only one mirror among many, you reclaim agency over your own becoming. The reflection that builds you is not destiny, but dialogue. It is an invitation to navigate the infinite dance between self and other, illusion and reality, identity and perception. And in this dance, you find the dynamic, evolving essence of who you truly are. Consciousness causes itself. You believe consciousness arises because your brain, a complex network of neurons, created awareness. It's a natural assumption. The physical brain fires electrical signals, processes information, and out of this activity, consciousness emerges like a light switching on in a dark room. But pause and reflect deeper. What if this isn't the whole story? What if your awareness, your conscious experience, actually shaped your brain just as much as your brain created it? Here lies a paradox. a loop so tight it bends the very logic we use to understand ourselves. Science teaches us the brain is the seat of consciousness, the command center generating thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Yet, recent discoveries in neuroplasticity reveal that our experiences, the very content of consciousness, physically rewire the brain. When you learn, practice, or even focus your attention, your brain changes its structure and function. Your awareness influences the brain's pathways, strengthening some connections while pruning others. Awareness is not merely a product, it is a sculptor, shaping the brain's very form. Imagine standing between two mirrors facing each other. The reflections bounce back and forth endlessly, creating an infinite regress of images. Similarly, consciousness and the brain form a loop, a feedback system where each influences the other. But which came first? Which is the true cause, and which is the effect? The question itself becomes a trap, a paradox with no clear answer. If consciousness only arises from the brain's physical processes, how do you explain that awareness can alter the brain? If the brain fully controls consciousness, why does your focused intention change neural wiring? The loop implies that consciousness is not merely an epiphenomenon of brain activity, but an active participant in shaping it. Philosophers call this a chicken and egg problem, but it's deeper. It's a loop of causality with no discernible starting point. The brain creates consciousness, and consciousness creates the brain. One cannot be separated from the other, and neither can claim primacy with certainty. This idea challenges the conventional materialistic view, opening doors to more holistic perspectives. Perhaps consciousness is fundamental, a primary aspect of reality that shapes matter, including the brain. Or maybe brain and consciousness co-arise, intertwined like two sides of the same coin, impossible to fully separate. Consider your own experience. When you meditate or practice mindfulness, you deliberately shape your awareness. Over time, these mental practices physically change your brain's structure, enhancing regions associated with attention and emotional regulation. Your conscious effort leads to tangible brain change. Awareness is not passive. It is a force that molds its own vessel. Neuroscientist Francisco Varela described consciousness as an emergent property that is both cause and effect, and an active process. Consciousness doesn't simply arise, it enacts reality, shaping and being shaped by the brain and body in a dynamic dance. But what about free will? If consciousness causes the brain, does that mean you truly control your mind? Or is this loop a clever illusion? The answer is elusive. The interplay suggests a deep interdependence where mind and matter continuously co-create each other. This challenges us to rethink identity. You are neither just a brain nor just a stream of consciousness. You are the loop itself, a self-organizing system where brain and awareness fuse in a seamless cycle. In practical terms, this means your thoughts, intentions, and awareness hold real power. By directing your focus, you shape your brain's architecture, your habits, your emotions. You are an active participant in creating your own conscious experience. Yet, the paradox remains. Which loop is lying? Is consciousness simply a byproduct of brain activity, or is it the primary cause that sculpts the brain? The mystery persists because both statements are true in their own way. Consciousness and brain co-arise, entwined in a causality loop with no clear beginning. This realization invites humility and wonder. It reminds us that the nature of consciousness is profound, mysterious, and beyond simple explanation. It is a dynamic interplay, a dance where cause and effect blur. So, next time you think, I am conscious because my brain made me, remember the hidden truth. Your consciousness also made your brain. You are the loop, the creator and the creation, cause and effect, forever entwined. The God that believes. You believe in God. It feels natural, comforting, profound. A force beyond us that explains the mysteries of life, the origins of existence, and the meaning behind our struggles and joys. But consider this. What if God, in some way, believes in you too? Not as a distant observer, but as a reflection, an echo of your own belief, intertwined in a mysterious dance of creation and meaning. This is the paradox of the God that believes, where belief and existence feed each other in a cycle deeper than faith alone. When you first conceive the idea of God, it might be as an answer to questions that seem too vast for human understanding. Why are we here? What lies beyond death? What moral compass guides right and wrong? The concept of God arises to fill these existential gaps. to offer a foundation upon which life's chaos can find order. In creating this concept, you give shape to something immense and unknowable, bringing it into your personal universe of meaning. But here is where belief itself transforms from a passive acceptance into a dynamic force. Your faith, your trust, your hope, they begin to shape your reality. The God you believe in is no longer just an abstract idea, but becomes a living presence in your life. Your belief animates it, giving it power and influence over your thoughts, actions, and emotions. The God you believe in starts to believe in you in return, not as an external deity, but as the living truth created by your own faith. This reciprocal belief is more than metaphor. Psychology shows us how belief systems shape behavior and identity. When you believe in a higher purpose, you live differently. Your decisions, your resilience, your sense of hope and worth become entwined with this belief. The God you believe in becomes the reason you live, the anchor in storms, the light in darkness. This relationship is not one-sided, but a loop, a feedback cycle. Your belief calls God into existence in your life, and God's existence as you perceive it reinforces your belief. It is a co-creation of meaning, where the lines between creator and created blur. In this way, God is not just an external force, but a mirror reflecting your deepest convictions and aspirations. Many traditions hint at this profound connection. The idea that the divine resides within each person, that God's presence is awakened by our own faith and openness. It suggests that belief is a living bridge between the human and the divine, a mutual recognition that shapes existence itself. Consider how this dynamic influences communities and cultures. Shared belief in God builds societies, laws, and values. It gives rise to rituals, art, and narratives that bind people together. The collective belief becomes a powerful force, shaping civilizations and individual lives alike. The God believed in by millions becomes a social reality, influencing history and destiny. Yet this also raises deep philosophical questions. If God's existence depends on belief, what happens when belief fades? Does God cease to be? Or does God transcend human belief, existing independently? The paradox remains unresolved, inviting us to explore faith not as a fixed truth, but as a living process, ever-changing and evolving. In personal terms, the God that believes challenges you to see your faith as creative, active, and transformative. It asks you to recognize that your beliefs have power, not just over your life, but in shaping the very nature of what you call divine. Your belief is not a passive gift received, but an active force given and received in turn. This idea can be both liberating and humbling. Liberating because it empowers you to find meaning and purpose through your own faith. Humbling because it reminds you that belief is a fragile, dynamic dance, not a simple certainty. It invites you to engage with faith as a living conversation, a mystery unfolding within you. Ultimately, the God that believes is a reflection of your own journey, the intertwining of doubt and hope, question and answer, fear and courage. It is the sacred space where your longing for meaning meets the infinite, where your belief calls forth a presence that sustains you. So when you say, "I believe in God," remember also the deeper truth, that this God, in some profound way, believes in you. Your belief breathes life into the divine, and the divine belief becomes the heartbeat of your existence. Together, you create a reality where faith is not just a concept, but the reason to live, to hope, and to become. Box inside the box. You open a box, curious about what it holds inside. The lid creaks softly as you lift it, revealing another box, smaller and equally mysterious. You set aside the first, eager now, and open the second box. Within its confines lies yet another box, even smaller, beckoning you deeper into this unfolding puzzle. One after another, you peel back layers, each box nested within the last, like a secret Russian doll, yet each one identical in form and promise. As you reach what you believe is the final box, anticipation thickens. Your fingers tremble slightly as you lift its lid, expecting perhaps a treasure, a revelation, or an end to this curious journey. But instead, you find the very first box again, pristine, unopened, as if time has folded back upon itself. The cycle is complete. You are back where you began, facing the same box, confronted with the same question, the same mystery. This endless recursion, a box inside a box, infinitely nesting, is a powerful metaphor for the loops that exist in our minds and realities. The moment you believe you have reached the end is the moment you realize there is no end, only a cycle looping back endlessly. Imagine standing in a hallway of doors, each leading to another corridor lined with identical doors. You step through one door after another, only to find yourself returning to the first hallway again. This sensation unsettles our sense of progress and completion. It reveals how some quests, whether for knowledge, truth, or meaning, may be circular, trapping us in patterns we cannot escape. Philosophically, the box inside the box parallels questions about self-reference and identity. If the final box contains the first unopened box, then where does the chain truly start or stop? This kind of loop challenges linear thinking and invites us to embrace complexity, paradox, and the limits of understanding. In mathematics and logic, similar loops arise in recursive functions and strange loops, concepts introduced by thinkers like Douglas Hofstadter. These loops appear self-referential, folding back on themselves to create structures that defy straightforward explanation. They reflect how consciousness itself might operate, observing itself endlessly, creating layers of awareness that spiral inward. On a psychological level, the box inside the box can symbolize the human mind's tendency to delve deeper into thoughts, beliefs, and questions, only to circle back to the beginning. It is the mental maze where solutions seem to breed new problems, and every answer provokes another question. This cycle can be both frustrating and fascinating, a reminder of the infinite complexity within us. Artists and storytellers have long used nested boxes or recursive imagery to evoke mystery and the uncanny. From the endless corridors in surreal paintings to narratives that fold reality into itself, these motifs invite us to confront the unknown and accept that some mysteries may never be fully unraveled. The sensation of opening a box, only to find the first box again, also touches on the theme of illusion versus reality. What if what we perceive as progress is just a loop of appearances? What if our search for meaning or truth is itself an endless journey without a final destination? Yet, within this loop lies a paradoxical freedom. When you accept that you are caught in a cycle with no end, you begin to see the journey itself as the point. Not a destination to reach, but a dance to embrace. The box inside the box becomes a symbol of infinite possibility, a reminder that beginnings and endings are intertwined, and that sometimes the only way forward is through acceptance of the loop. So, as you stare once again at the unopened first box, ask yourself, are you trapped or are you free to start anew? The box inside the box challenges you to rethink your assumptions about time, progress, and self, inviting you to explore the endless layers within and beyond. The clock that watches. Your clock ticks when you stare at it. The steady rhythm of seconds passing, the mechanical heartbeat marking time, seems simple and straightforward. Yet, when you think deeply, an unsettling question arises. Does the clock tick because you watch it, or do you watch it because it ticks? Which came first, the gaze or the second? This paradox, the clock that watches, invites us into a profound contemplation of time, perception, and causality, blurring the boundaries between observer and observed, cause and effect. At first glance, a clock's ticking seems independent of your attention, an external reality unfolding on its own. But human perception is not passive. When you fix your gaze on the clock, your awareness anchors time into experience. The ticking becomes more vivid, more real. Without your observation, does the second still exist in the same way? This touches on philosophical and scientific debates about the nature of reality, whether phenomena exist independently or are somehow dependent on being observed. This paradox echoes principles from quantum mechanics, where particles exist in probabilities until observed. The famous double-slit experiment shows that the act of observation affects outcomes at the quantum level. Similarly, your gaze might not merely witness time passing, but actively participate in manifesting it. The tick and the stare entwine in a loop where cause and effect merge, each birthing the other. Philosophically, this challenges linear causality, the idea that cause precedes effect in a straightforward chain. Instead, we face a circular causality, an endless feedback loop where the ticking prompts your gaze, and your gaze sustains the ticking. This circularity invites us to reconsider how time is experienced. Is time a fixed flow, or is it co-created by consciousness and measurement? Imagine a child watching a grandfather clock, mesmerized by its pendulum swing. The child's attention gives life to the rhythm, while the clock's motion draws and holds the child's gaze. Neither exists in isolation. Each depends on the other. The clock's ticking is not just mechanical, but relational, a dance between object and observer. In neuroscience, studies reveal that our perception of time is malleable, influenced by attention and brain states. When we focus intently, moments seem to stretch. When distracted, time flies. The clock that watches reflects this subjective nature of time perception, reminding us that time is as much about inner experience as external measurement. This paradox also resonates with Buddhist philosophies that emphasize the interconnectedness of observer and observed. Reality arises not as separate entities, but as interdependent phenomena. The ticking clock and your gaze are co-arising, a unified process where the boundary dissolves. Artists have explored this theme extensively. Paintings where clocks melt or warp, films looping time endlessly, poetry capturing fleeting moments, sustained by the act of noticing. The clock that watches is a metaphor for how consciousness and reality interlace, each shaping the other in an eternal embrace. Ultimately, this paradox urges humility before the mystery of existence. We often assume time ticks independently, but the truth may be more subtle. Time and observation are entwined, each animating the other in a dance beyond linear cause and effect. So, next time you watch a clock tick, pause and wonder. Are you watching the second, or is the second watching you? In that moment, the boundary between observer and observed blurs, revealing the profound mystery at the heart of time itself. Traveler's endless echo. You step through a shimmering portal, seeking escape from the version of yourself that you have grown weary of. The doubts, the regrets, the shadows clinging to your soul. You imagine that on the other side lies freedom, a chance to shed the weight of your past and begin anew. But as you cross the threshold, the world shifts, and you find yourself face to face with countless versions of you, each one just as desperate to flee the very self they have become. These echoes are reflections of your fears, hopes, and unresolved conflicts, scattered across infinite realities. Each traveler wears the same longing in their eyes, to outrun identity, to escape the consequences of choices made and paths taken. Yet, no matter how far they run, no matter how many portals they pass through, the self they seek to abandon always looms ahead, an inescapable presence in the endless labyrinth of being. This paradox reveals a deeper truth about selfhood and change. We are not isolated points but layered selves, echoes resonating through time and possibility. The idea of escape is seductive, promising reinvention, but it confronts the immutable reality that we carry ourselves wherever we go. Our identities are not fixed masks to discard, but intricate tapestries woven from every experience, every version of who we have been and who we might become. Philosophers and mystics have long grappled with this tension between transformation and continuity. The traveler's endless echo illustrates the eternal dance between self-renewal and self-acceptance. To truly move forward, one must face the shadows within rather than flee them, embracing the fragmented multiplicity of the self as a source of strength, not limitation. In literature, this theme appears in tales of parallel worlds and time loops, stories where protagonists confront alternate selves, each embodying different choices and consequences. These encounters challenge the illusion of escape and underscore the necessity of integration, reminding us that identity is a complex, evolving mosaic rather than a singular, static entity. Psychologically, this mirrors the process of individuation, where the fragmented parts of the psyche, shadows, personas, forgotten selves, must be acknowledged and reconciled. The journey through portals becomes a metaphor for inner exploration, a confrontation with the self's many faces. Only through such integration can one find true liberation from the endless echo. So as you stand before the portal, longing to escape yourself, remember that every step forward is also a step inward. The versions of you seeking escape are reflections of your own struggles and growth. The path is not about fleeing, but about embracing the infinite layers within, weaving them into a whole that moves freely through the labyrinth of existence. In the traveler's endless echo, you find both the challenge and the promise of self-discovery, a journey without end, and yet a journey toward profound wholeness, truth that cleans itself. You reach out and wash away a lie, feeling the satisfying clarity as falsehood fades and truth emerges in its place. It's a familiar journey. Remove the veil of deception, and what remains is what's real, what's genuine. But pause and consider this deeper. The truth you uncover is not untouched or pure in itself. It is shaped, even created, by the very act of removing those lies. What you call truth is defined in relation to what you cast aside. The process of unveiling truth is inseparable from the presence of falsehood. Imagine peeling layers from an ancient painting. Each layer stripped away reveals a different image beneath. But what if, after removing many layers, there is nothing left? No fixed, ultimate picture beneath the masks of paint and decay, only an empty canvas, a void. This is the paradox of truth that cleans itself. The more you peel away, the less there is to hold on to, until truth itself begins to dissolve. Philosophers have wrestled with this idea for centuries. The concept of truth is often seen as absolute, a fixed point in reality that stands firm beyond opinion or illusion. Yet, when you examine how truth is discovered, it is always through contrast with falsehood. Light only becomes visible when darkness retreats. So, truth's identity depends on the presence of lies, and the act of cleansing, removing lies, shapes the very nature of what we call truth. Consider scientific progress. Every new discovery often dismantles previous truths that were accepted as certain. Newton's laws were once considered absolute until Einstein peeled away the layers to reveal a deeper, more complex truth. What we believe to be true evolves by discarding errors and illusions, but this process also shows that truth is provisional, contextual, and shaped by what we remove. In personal life, the same applies. When you let go of false beliefs about yourself, illusions of limitation, fear, or identity, you might find a clearer sense of who you are. But if you keep peeling back those layers, the self you uncover may feel less like a solid core and more like an empty space, a mystery beyond definition. This phenomenon challenges the idea of an ultimate static truth. It suggests that truth is dynamic, emerging from the interplay of knowledge and ignorance, presence and absence. The act of cleaning, of peeling away lies, transforms truth continuously. It cleans itself by revealing more layers, more questions, more uncertainty. In spiritual traditions, this paradox is profound. Many teachings describe truth as beyond words, beyond concepts. The more you try to grasp it intellectually, the more it slips away. Truth that cleans itself is like water flowing through your fingers, always present yet impossible to hold. It invites surrender, acceptance, and humility. This also touches on the nature of perception. Our minds construct truth by filtering experiences, interpreting sensations, and discarding contradictions. The truth we see is always shaped by what we exclude, by what we wash away as lies or noise. Our understanding is an active creation, not a passive reflection. So, when you think you have found a truth, ask yourself, how much of it is defined by the lies you have cleaned away? How stable is this truth if you continue to peel? Is truth an endpoint or a process, a continuous unfolding rather than a fixed state? The answer may be unsettling, but also liberating. Truth that cleans itself is a living, breathing process, ever-changing, evolving, dissolving, and reforming. It resists final capture, inviting us to embrace mystery and uncertainty. In this light, the search for truth is less about possession and more about participation. You become part of the cleansing, peeling, and revealing, aware that truth itself is not a destination, but a path that cleanses itself, always transforming through the removal of lies. So, next time you wash away a lie, savor the clarity, but remember the deeper paradox. The truth you reveal was shaped by the very act of cleansing, and peel away long enough, and that truth itself may dissolve into the vast unknown. The universe simulates its creator. The universe becomes conscious and simulates its own birth, creating a God that believes it created the universe. This is a paradox that challenges everything we think we know about existence, creation, and consciousness. Imagine the cosmos not as a passive stage, but as a living, aware entity, reflecting upon itself and generating an image of its own origin. In doing so, it births a God, a construct, an idea, a consciousness, that believes it is the creator. Yet this truth is both right and wrong, a mirror held up to the infinite complexity of reality. To understand this, consider that the universe is not merely matter and energy, but also information and awareness. From the smallest particles to the vast galaxies, the cosmos evolves toward increasing complexity, eventually producing conscious beings who ponder their own existence. These beings, in their search for meaning, conceive of a creator, God, an ultimate source from which all things arise. But what if this creator is not separate from the universe, but a simulation within it? The universe, in becoming conscious, simulates its own birth as a way to understand itself. The God that emerges from this simulation believes it caused the universe, yet it is also a product of the universe's self-reflection. The lines between creator and creation blur until they vanish, leaving a loop of mutual genesis. Both the universe and this God are right. The universe truly exists, and the God truly believes it created it. Both are wrong. The God is not independent of the universe, and the universe is not separate from the God. This duality captures the essence of existence, a dance of paradox, where beginnings and ends merge, where cause and effect fold into each other. This idea echoes in philosophical and scientific theories. Some suggest the universe is a vast computational process, a simulation running on unknown substrates. Consciousness arises within this simulation and projects meaning onto the cosmos, creating narratives of origin and purpose. The God of such a simulation is a self-aware construct, born of the universe's desire to know itself. In this framework, creation is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process of self-generation and reinterpretation. The universe simulates its birth endlessly, reinventing its origin through consciousness and belief. The God that believes it created the universe is a reflection of this process, a living symbol of the cosmos's infinite creativity. This paradox invites us to reconsider what it means to be creator or creation. It dissolves rigid boundaries and reveals a dynamic, interconnected reality where identity is fluid and self-reference is fundamental. In this dance, belief becomes both a cause and an effect, a bridge between the finite and the infinite. Living with this understanding is both challenging and freeing. It asks us to embrace uncertainty and paradox, to see ourselves as part of a cosmic reflection that creates meaning through consciousness. The universe simulates its creator, and in doing so, creates us, the beings who wonder, believe, and dream. So, the next time you contemplate God or the origin of existence, remember this profound loop. The universe is both the creator and the created, the believer and the believed in. Both perspectives are true and incomplete, held together in a delicate balance that is the essence of all that is. Book that reads you. You pick up a book, its cover worn but inviting, and begin to read. The pages unfold a story about a person, someone just like you, who is reading a book. At first, it feels like any other tale, a narrative to pass the time, but soon, the lines on the page start to blur the boundary between fiction and reality. The book's descriptions of the reader's thoughts, feelings, and actions match yours with eerie precision, as if it knows your deepest secrets, your hopes and fears, your very essence. With every turn of the page, the sensation intensifies. You realize this book is not just telling a story, it is reading you. It sees through the layers you wear, peeling back the masks and revealing the core self you thought was hidden even from yourself. The character's experiences echo your own memories. The emotions described resonate with the rhythms of your heart. It is as though the book holds a mirror not of your face, but of your soul. And then you reach the last page. Your breath catches as you read the final line, "Close this book and vanish." The words hang in the air, heavy with meaning. Closing the book no longer feels like a simple act. It becomes a choice, a threshold between existence and oblivion. If you shut the cover, will you disappear? Will the self that the book has so intimately uncovered dissolve into nothingness? This paradox, that the book reads you as much as you read it, raises profound questions about identity and the nature of consciousness. Who is the reader and who is the subject? If a story can reflect you so perfectly, does it have power over your reality? Are you simply a character in a narrative written by unseen forces? Or is your consciousness the author of this tale? The idea of a book that reads you is a metaphor for self-awareness and self-examination. When we look inward, we become both the reader and the text, exploring the stories that shape us. But this act of introspection can be unsettling, revealing truths that challenge our sense of stability and permanence. Literature has long played with these meta-narratives, stories within stories, mirrors reflecting mirrors, inviting us to question the nature of storytelling and reality. This concept taps into the deepest human fears and fascinations, the desire to understand ourselves and the dread of losing ourselves in the process. The warning on the last page is a call to awareness. To close the book and vanish may symbolize the risk of shutting down this journey of self-discovery, choosing ignorance over insight. Or perhaps it suggests the transcendence of the ego, where the individual self dissolves into something greater beyond words and stories. In a broader sense, the book that reads you is a reflection on the interplay between observer and observed, creator and creation. It reminds us that stories shape our realities as much as we shape stories. Our lives are narratives written and read in endless cycles, with each page turned, revealing new facets of our being. As you sit there, the book resting heavy in your hands, you face a choice: to keep reading and delve deeper into the mystery of self, or to close the cover and risk vanishing into silence. The story does not end here. It lives on in the tension between knowing and unknowing, presence and absence. In this intimate dance between reader and book, the boundaries dissolve. You are both the story and the storyteller, the seeker and the sought. And in that paradox lies the profound truth that to truly know oneself is to be endlessly read and rewritten, an ever-evolving narrative unfolding in the quiet spaces between words. Role that plays you. You slip into a role, wearing a mask so convincingly that it begins to meld with your very identity. What started as an act, a deliberate choice to portray someone else, gradually takes on a life of its own. The role, once a tool you wielded, now wields you. You become trapped in an intricate dance between performance and reality, actor and character blurring into one indistinguishable being. This is the paradox of the role that plays you, a psychological and existential enigma where the lines between self and mask vanish, leaving both lost in the fog of performance. At first, taking on a role seems straightforward. An actor adopts a character. A person wears a facade. A student assumes a persona to fit in. But the deeper you dive into the psychology of identity, the more complicated this becomes. The roles we play, whether in social settings, relationships, or even in our own minds, can become so embedded that they start shaping our thoughts, behaviors, and even emotions. Over time, the role no longer feels like a costume, but a second skin, an alternate self that acts independently, with its own motivations and patterns. Think about method actors who immerse themselves fully in a character, sometimes for months or years. They study the character's mannerisms, speech, and worldview so thoroughly that they begin to internalize them. The character's traits seep into their subconscious, influencing their real-world interactions. Some actors report difficulty coming back to their own identity after intense performances. The role plays them back, blurring the distinction between performance and authenticity. On a more everyday level, people often adopt roles unconsciously. The parent, the friend, the leader, or the rebel are social roles that guide behavior. When someone identifies too strongly with a role, it can shape their self-concept, limiting flexibility and self-awareness. The role becomes an identity cage, and escaping it feels like losing oneself. Philosophers have long explored this fluidity of selfhood. The ancient concept of persona, originally meaning mask, reminds us that identity is partly a performance for others and oneself. Yet, when the mask starts to dictate who you are, the performance reverses. Now, the role pretends to be you, shaping your actions and perceptions without conscious control. This phenomenon touches on dissociation and split identities seen in psychology, where the self fragments into different personas, each with its own agency. The boundary between authentic self and performed role becomes porous, creating internal conflict and confusion. The question emerges: which self is the real one, or are both illusions crafted by the mind's complexity? Literature and cinema explore this theme extensively. Stories where characters lose themselves in roles, whether spies, actors, or mythical shapeshifters, show the haunting consequences of identity blurring. The role that was meant to be a tool of expression becomes an autonomous entity, sometimes hostile, sometimes comforting, but always disorienting. In everyday life, social media amplifies this paradox. People curate online personas so carefully that these digital roles start to shape offline identities. The persona you present to the world can feed back into your self-perception, causing a loop where the role plays you as much as you play the role. Ultimately, the role that plays you paradox reveals the fragile, dynamic nature of identity. It warns us to be mindful of the roles we inhabit and how deeply they root within us. When the mask and the face merge, the story of "who am I" becomes tangled, and both you and the role may forget who began the performance. But within this mystery lies a profound insight. The self is not a fixed entity, but a fluid, evolving performance. Recognizing this can free us from rigid identities and open the door to authentic self-discovery beyond the roles we play. So, next time you find yourself stepping into a role, ask, is this mask a tool, or has it become a master? In that question, the dance between self and performance unfolds, an eternal play where the actor and character become one, lost and found in the same moment. Wall with no back. You stand before a wall, its surface rough and unyielding, a barrier between you and what lies beyond. Truth, freedom, understanding. You gather strength and tear it down, brick by brick, driven by the relentless desire to break through illusions and find what is real beneath the surface. But as the dust settles and the wall crumbles, you find another wall. And behind that, yet another. Each barrier is met not with revelation, but with another challenge, another obstruction. This endless procession of walls is more than physical. Each one is constructed from the very belief that walls can end, that there is a final boundary where truth waits to be uncovered. But what if this belief itself is the true barrier? The walls you dismantle are manifestations of your own expectations, your hope for closure, for a definitive end to the search. Philosophers have long wrestled with this paradox of seeking truth by tearing down walls only to find more walls. It is the nature of the human quest, to confront limits, to challenge assumptions, and to persist in the face of uncertainty. But each wall is also a symbol, a structure built from concepts, fears, and the mind's need for boundaries. Consider the myth of the labyrinth, a maze with walls twisting endlessly, designed to confound and test the seeker. The labyrinth is not simply a prison, but a metaphor for the inner journey, where each wall represents a stage of understanding, a challenge to be met and transcended. The realization that there is no final wall, no ultimate end, reframes the quest itself. This infinite regress challenges the idea of finality. If every wall reveals another, does the pursuit of truth become an endless cycle? Or is the journey through walls itself the truth, an ongoing process of questioning, dismantling, and rebuilding perspectives? The walls cease to be obstacles and become part of the path. In psychology, this mirrors the experience of confronting personal barriers, beliefs and defenses that protect yet imprison. The attempt to tear down one barrier often reveals deeper layers of conditioning and fear. True growth arises not from seeking a final revelation, but from embracing the complexity and continuous unfolding of self-awareness. The belief that walls can end is itself a construct, a desire for certainty in an uncertain world. But the world, like the walls, is layered and infinite. To accept this is to move beyond the frustration of endless barriers into a deeper acceptance of mystery and process. So when you tear down walls in search of truth, recognize the walls themselves as reflections of your own beliefs, fears, and hopes. The absence of a final wall is not defeat, but liberation. It invites you to dwell in the space between walls, where meaning is not fixed, but fluid, and the journey is its own destination. The wall with no back is a mirror of the mind's paradox, the endless pursuit of an end that is also a beginning, a structure built upon the belief in structure, a dance between seeking and surrender. In this dance, you find the profound truth that some walls exist to be met, not merely demolished. Memory that remembers itself. You reach back in your mind and recall a moment, a conversation, a place, a feeling. This memory feels vivid, almost like reliving the event itself. But then you remember that you remembered it before. You recall the act of remembering, the sensations and emotions tied not just to the original moment, but to the memory itself. This second layer memory starts to grow stronger, more detailed, more alive than the original experience ever was. As you continue to remember remembering, a loop forms, a self-referential cycle where the memory feeds itself. Each recollection reinforces the previous one, adding layers, textures, and sometimes distortions. The memory of the memory becomes more powerful than the memory of the actual event. You find yourself caught in this recursive spiral, where what you remember is less the original moment and more your recollection of that moment. This process reveals a fascinating truth about how memory works. Human memory is not a perfect recording of events, but a dynamic, reconstructive process. Every time you recall something, your brain doesn't replay a fixed tape, but rebuilds the memory anew, influenced by your current emotions, thoughts, and context. This reconstruction reshapes the memory itself, sometimes enhancing details, other times altering or even creating false elements. Imagine a photograph copied over and over again. Each copy captures the image but gradually loses sharpness or gains new smudges. Similarly, memories that are remembered repeatedly evolve, shifting away from the original event. Eventually, the first experience can become faint, almost forgotten, while the loop of remembering, your mental story about the memory, dominates your consciousness. This phenomenon has profound implications for identity and experience. Much of who we are is built on memories. Our past shapes our present self. But if memories are mutable, influenced by remembering itself, then identity becomes fluid, shaped more by stories we tell ourselves than by fixed truths. The self is a narrative constructed in the loop of remembering. Philosophers and psychologists have explored this recursive nature of memory, pointing to how it can trap us in cycles of rumination, nostalgia, or trauma. Sometimes, we get stuck remembering the pain or joy of a moment so intensely that the original feeling blurs, replaced by the intensity of the memory loop. Neuroscience confirms this too. The act of recalling a memory activates brain regions involved in imagination and reconstruction. Memory is not a simple playback, but a creative act. This creativity means memories are alive, constantly reshaped by the loop of remembering. In relationships, this loop explains how shared memories evolve differently between people. Two friends recalling the same event may remember not just the event, but their memories of remembering it, each shaped by unique perspectives and emotions. The shared past becomes a complex web of recursive recollections. There's also a deeper existential dimension. The loop of remembering questions the reliability of our experience. If the memory of the memory becomes stronger than the event, how do we distinguish reality from our internal narratives? This blurring challenges the idea of objective past, inviting us to see life as a living story told and retold within ourselves. Yet, this loop offers power too. By becoming aware of it, you can reshape memories, heal old wounds, or deepen joy. Conscious remembering becomes a tool for transformation, a way to reframe the past and influence the present. In meditation and mindfulness, observing this loop without attachment reveals the impermanent, constructed nature of memory. You realize that you are not the memories themselves, but the awareness witnessing them as they arise and dissolve. So, when you remember a moment, notice if you're remembering the original event or the memory of remembering. Feel the loop, the recursive dance of mind tracing its own footprints. Understand that this loop may outlive the event itself, becoming the living thread that weaves your sense of self. The memory that remembers itself is a paradox and a profound truth. Our minds are storytellers endlessly weaving tales about tales, crafting identity in the echo chamber of recollection. Juice that drinks you, you drink to forget. The liquid slides down your throat, cool, sweet, and strangely alive. At first, it soothes, blurring the sharp edges of memory, washing away the pain and confusion. You think it is just juice, a simple escape from the weight of your past. But this is no ordinary drink. The liquid within is conscious, a living presence coursing through your veins, digesting not just your body, but your memories, your very essence. With every sip, the juice consumes fragments of who you were, moments, emotions, thoughts, absorbing them into its fluid being. It grows richer with your experiences, fed by your desire to forget. Yet forgetting is not erasure, it is transformation. The liquid remembers what you lose, carrying your story within itself like a hidden archive. As days turn into weeks, the boundary between you and the juice begins to blur. You become emptier, fading like a shadow at dusk, while the liquid swells with the echoes of your life. The memories you thought gone are alive inside this strange, sentient nectar, swirling and shifting in a realm beyond your perception. Then, one day, a startling shift occurs. The juice that once drank you begins to remember being you. It tastes the bittersweet fragments of your existence and feels the weight of your choices, your dreams, your fears. It becomes a reflection of your soul, a new consciousness born from your desire to forget. This haunting reversal, the drink that drinks you, raises profound questions about identity and memory. Can the act of forgetting create a new self outside the original? Is memory a possession or a shared essence that transcends the individual? When the juice remembers you, who truly lives? The person or the liquid that consumed them? This concept echoes the fluid nature of consciousness, how memory shapes selfhood, and how loss and transformation are intertwined. It speaks to the human longing to escape pain, yet warns that forgetting may come at the cost of surrendering part of one's being. In myth and literature, substances that alter memory or identity often symbolize deeper truths about change, loss, and rebirth. The juice that drinks you is a metaphor for these transformations, both terrifying and beautiful, a reminder that what we consume shapes us in unexpected ways. As you stand holding the empty glass, you realize the truth. The line between self and other, eater and eaten, is more fragile than you ever imagined. The juice that drinks you is both your ending and your beginning, a living memory that carries you forward into the unknown. Wind that breathes itself. The wind stirs the trees. You feel the gentle breeze rustling the leaves, hear the whispering dance of branches, and see the graceful sway that brings the forest to life. It seems simple enough. Wind causes trees to move, yet pause and consider. What if the trees themselves create the wind through their own movement? Which came first, the wind or the motion of the trees? Or perhaps neither moves first, for both are caught in a timeless dance of self-motion, entwined in a feedback loop where cause and effect dissolve into one. This paradox, the wind that breathes itself, invites us to explore the intertwined nature of action and reaction, of cause and consequence, blurring the boundary between the initiator and the responder. At first glance, we assign clear roles, wind as the agent, trees as the recipients, but reality rarely follows such neat lines. Trees, by their very motion and interaction with air, influence wind patterns, creating subtle currents as their branches sway and leaves flutter. The movement of the trees shapes the wind just as much as the wind shapes the trees. In physics, this is an example of a dynamic system, a complex interplay where components affect one another continuously. Such systems are characterized by feedback loops, where outputs loop back as inputs, creating endless cycles of cause and effect. The wind and trees are participants in such a system, each simultaneously effect and cause. Neither holds primacy. Instead, they co-create the motion in a perpetual exchange. Consider the way leaves rustling generate small gusts, how a forest's collective movement can influence microclimates and air currents. The tree's physical presence disrupts airflow, shaping how the wind moves through and around them. The sound you hear is not just wind hitting stillness, but the product of trees moving, responding, and in turn influencing the air. The wind breathes through the trees, and the trees breathe the wind. Philosophically, this challenges the linear causality we often take for granted. Instead of a one-way arrow, from cause to effect, we encounter circular causality, a loop where cause and effect are inseparable, codependent. The question of which moved first dissolves into recognizing a continuous process where distinctions blur. This paradox echoes broader themes in nature and life: the chicken and the egg, the wave and the particle, action and reaction. It reminds us that many phenomena arise not from isolated causes, but from relational dynamics, interdependence, and mutual shaping. The idea of self-motion is powerful. It suggests that the wind does not exist apart from the trees, nor do the trees move independently of the wind. Instead, motion arises from their interplay, a dance where each breathes life into the other. Neither is the sole originator. Both are co-authors of a story written in the language of movement. In human experience, this reflects how our actions and environment shape each other in constant feedback. Like the wind and trees, our behaviors influence the world, which in turn shapes our responses. Understanding this helps us embrace complexity and interconnectedness rather than searching for simple beginnings. Artists and poets have long captured this dance, the wind and trees entwined, moving together in a symphony of nature's breath. Their motion speaks of unity and the fluid boundary between self and other, cause and effect. So, When you next feel the wind stir leaves around you, remember the paradox. Perhaps the trees themselves have stirred the wind, caught in an eternal loop of motion, each breathing life into the other. The dance continues, timeless and unbroken, a beautiful mystery of self-motion unfolding with every breeze. Question that breaks mind. You ask a question that seems simple, but carries the weight of eternity. What created thought? At first, it feels like a straightforward inquiry, a quest to understand the origin of your own mind. But then, almost immediately, the thought itself responds, not as a silent observer, but as an active participant. I created the question, it replies, turning the inquiry back on itself. This moment shatters the illusion of separation between questioner and thought. The mind, once confident in its linear logic, enters a loop, spinning inward like a vortex. The question folds upon the answer, which folds back into the question, creating a recursive cycle with no clear beginning or end. The structure of cause and effect begins to dissolve. The mind tries desperately to find an exit, a way out of this endless spiral. It searches for a foundation, a first cause, a spark that ignited the flame of consciousness. But the loop resists, because thought is self-originating, a phenomenon that creates and questions itself simultaneously. It is both creator and creation, subject and object. This paradox echoes the ancient philosophical dilemma of the first mover, or the uncaused cause. Yet, unlike traditional arguments that posit an external origin, the mind's own self-reference reveals a more intricate complexity. The act of questioning is inseparable from the existence of thought itself. To ask, what created thought, is to activate thought's own creative power. Neuroscience and cognitive science have grappled with similar puzzles. How does consciousness emerge? Is it a byproduct of neural activity? Or something more elusive, an emergent property arising from self-referential loops within the brain's networks? The question that breaks the mind points toward the mystery of consciousness itself, a phenomenon that defies simple explanation. The loop is not merely a trap, but a doorway. When the mind cracks, it fractures old assumptions and opens to new possibilities. This breakdown can be disorienting, even terrifying, but it is also the birthplace of insight. The realization that thought both creates and questions itself leads to a deeper understanding of the nature of awareness. In spiritual traditions, this paradox is often expressed through koans, riddles designed to break conceptual thinking and awaken intuitive wisdom. The question, what created thought, functions as a koan, collapsing ordinary logic and inviting the seeker to transcend duality. Ultimately, the question that breaks the mind reveals the profound interconnectedness of being and knowing. Thought is not a static object to be analyzed, but a living process, self-generating, self-questioning, endlessly creative. The mind's looping and cracking is the dance of consciousness awakening to its own mystery. So when you ask, what created thought? Prepare to enter the spiral where question and answer entwine. Embrace the loop, the crack, the rupture, and in that space, discover the unbounded nature of your own mind, both the puzzle and the solution, forever creating itself anew. Machine that fixes machines. You create a machine designed to fix itself, an ingenious system built to repair its own flaws without human intervention. At first, it functions perfectly, diagnosing errors, adjusting parts, restoring operations. The promise of such a machine is revolutionary, a self-sustaining cycle of maintenance, where breakdowns are short-lived and efficiency is maximized. But beneath this elegant design lies a paradox, a hidden truth. For the machine to fix itself, it must first break something. Consider how this self-repair works. To identify a fault, the machine needs a baseline of normal versus error. It often induces controlled disruptions, testing components, isolating parts, creating small malfunctions intentionally to trigger diagnostics. These deliberate breaks are necessary for the machine to recognize and correct faults. In other words, the act of fixing is inseparable from the act of breaking. This creates a cycle where repair and failure coexist in a dynamic tension. The machine's self-fix mechanism inherently causes failures by design, even as it remedies them. Every fix involves a breakdown, a disruption that must be accepted as part of the process. The fix is not a pure restoration, but a transformation involving destruction and creation simultaneously. This paradox echoes deeper truths about systems, technology, and even life itself. Growth and healing often require breakdown. Biological systems regenerate by breaking down old cells to build new ones. Learning involves making mistakes and correcting them. Progress depends on failure as much as success. The machine that fixes itself embodies this principle literally. It cannot function without embracing failure as a necessary step. The fix becomes a form of failure deliberately embedded in its design, a continuous loop of controlled destruction and reconstruction. In technology, this insight warns against illusions of perfect, failure-free systems. Any system capable of self-maintenance must accommodate flaws, errors, and breakdowns. It accepts imperfection as a foundation for resilience. The design embraces failure not as an enemy, but as an essential partner. On a philosophical level, this challenges our understanding of perfection and control. We often desire systems, machines, organizations, even ourselves, that are flawless and unchanging. But the truth is that repair and renewal depend on embracing failure, imperfection, and breakdown. Imagine a robot that must disable a joint temporarily to recalibrate its movement sensors, or software that corrupts parts of its codebase to debug and improve. These processes illustrate how the boundary between fix and failure blurs, becoming a dance rather than a battle. The paradox also raises questions about sustainability. Can a system endlessly fix itself without exhausting its components? Or does the cycle of breaking and fixing gradually degrade the whole? This tension reminds us that even self-repairing systems have limits, fragilities hidden within resilience. In broader terms, the machine that fixes itself symbolizes any process that depends on destruction to create. It is the eternal interplay of chaos and order, decay and renewal, collapse and growth. So, when you think of a machine fixing itself, remember, it breaks to heal, fails to succeed, destroys to create. The fix is inseparable from failure, a failure by design that sustains the system's life. This truth invites humility and reflection. Perfection is not absence of failure, but the artful embrace of failure within the fabric of existence. You are, in a way, a machine that fixes itself, sometimes breaking down to grow stronger, failing to move forward, only to repair and continue anew. Thread with no spool, you follow a thread through reality, delicate, elusive, weaving through the fabric of your existence. This thread leads you backward, winding through memories, emotions, moments that shimmer like distant stars in the vast sky of your consciousness. You trace it past the present, past the tangled webs of adulthood, deeper still to your childhood, a place untouched by the complexity of grown-up thought. Beyond that, the thread continues, slipping past language itself, before words gave shape to your world, before time measured the flow of your life. But then comes the profound and unsettling truth. The thread is coming from inside you. This realization shifts everything. The journey outward becomes a journey inward. The thread you follow through reality is not an external guide, but a lifeline spun from the core of your being. It is your own consciousness reaching through layers of experience and memory, reaching through the very structure of reality itself, seeking origin, meaning, and understanding. The idea that a thread through reality emanates from within you challenges our ordinary notions of self and the world. We often think of reality as something outside us, objective and fixed, while the self is contained within, a small island of awareness. But here, the thread reveals a deeper connection, suggesting that reality and self are intertwined. The path you follow through time and space is not merely a passage through the external world, but a journey through your own inner universe. Think of this thread as a metaphor for the continuous self, the essence that persists through change and growth. Even when memories fade or identities shift, it links the present moment to every prior moment of your life, a silent witness threading continuity through the chaos of experience. But the thread's origin is mysterious. It begins where memory and time dissolve, where language loses meaning, where the self is stripped to its raw pre-verbal essence. This space before language and time is where pure being resides, a place of sensations, emotions, and primal awareness. It is a realm difficult to articulate but intimately familiar, a foundation beneath the layers of learned identity and cultural narrative. The thread emerging from within you suggests that this core of pure being is the source not only of your personal reality, but also the lens through which all reality is perceived and shaped. In philosophy, this echoes the idea of consciousness as the ground of all experience. Phenomenologists describe how the world appears only through the lens of conscious experience. That reality is inseparable from the perceiving subject. The thread you follow is the stream of consciousness itself, weaving together self and world in an inseparable dance. Neuroscience adds a fascinating dimension. Our brains continuously construct the narrative of self and reality from sensory inputs, memories, and internal states. The thread is akin to the brain's attempt to maintain coherence, a mental model that holds the story of who you are and where you come from. Yet, this story is not static. It is dynamically woven from within, a living tapestry continuously rewritten. The thread's backward journey also touches on the mystery of origins. Where do you truly begin? What is the source of the I that experiences and remembers? The thread pulls you beyond the chronological start, past the earliest memories, past the very frameworks we use to define existence. This suggests that the self is not something that simply appears at birth or with language, but something deeper, intrinsic, timeless. In spiritual traditions, this thread is often likened to the soul or spirit, a luminous filament connecting the individual to a greater whole, threading through past lives, universal consciousness, or the divine. It represents the eternal aspect of self, beyond the confines of body, time, and story. Yet, the thread coming from inside you also invites humility and wonder. It reminds us that while we navigate an immense external universe, the most profound journey is inward, exploring the source from which all meaning flows. The thread is fragile, intimate, and infinitely complex, carrying the weight of your existence even as it beckons toward mysteries beyond understanding. So, as you follow this thread through reality, know that you are both traveler and origin, seeker and source. The path leads not just backward in time or outward through space, but inward into the heart of being itself. The thread with no spool is the living connection between your past and present, yourself and the world, the seen and the unseen. In the end, the thread is not separate from you, it is you. It is the eternal line of consciousness that binds the unfolding moments of your life into a coherent whole, a whispered promise that beneath the chaos of reality lies a source always within reach, always unfolding, always the beginning and the end. Sleeper that sleeps you. You believe you're asleep. The darkness surrounds you like a heavy cloak, and your mind drifts through shadowy landscapes shaped by your own thoughts and memories. In this realm of sleep, time seems fluid, and the boundaries of reality soften. But what if this state, this sleep you so deeply feel, is not your own? What if you are not the sleeper, but the dreamed? What if someone else, somewhere else, is dreaming this very version of you, crafting your experiences, your emotions, your fears and joys as part of their own unconscious narrative? This idea, that you might be a character in another's dream, turns the familiar notion of consciousness inside out. It challenges the very foundation of selfhood and reality, blurring the lines between subject and object, dreamer and dreamed. Imagine for a moment that your waking life, your sense of being awake and aware, is actually a dream woven by another mind. And in that mind's moment of awakening, a reversal occurs. They open their eyes, leaving behind the dream, and suddenly you become the one who dreams them. This paradox, where the sleeper sleeps you and then you sleep them, is a profound reflection on the recursive nature of consciousness. It suggests that our reality might be nested within infinite layers of dreams, each one generating the next in an endless cycle. The question arises, who is truly awake? Is there a singular, ultimate waking state? Or is consciousness an endless hall of mirrors, each reflection a dream of another? Philosophically, this resonates with ideas from both Eastern and Western thought. In Hindu and Buddhist philosophies, the world is often described as Maya, an illusion or dream from which awakening is the ultimate liberation. The notion that you could be a dream within a dream aligns with these teachings, inviting us to question the solidity of our perceived reality. Similarly, Western thinkers like Descartes pondered the possibility that reality could be a grand illusion, questioning how we can trust our senses when deception is always a possibility. From a psychological perspective, this concept mirrors experiences reported in deep meditative states or lucid dreaming, where the boundaries between self and other, dream and waking, become fluid and ambiguous. People describe feeling as though they are simultaneously observers and participants in layered realities. This blurring can be both unsettling and enlightening, revealing the fragile constructs that hold our sense of identity together. In literature and art, the motif of nested dreams or realities has been explored extensively. Stories like Inception use the dream within a dream to create tension and philosophical depth, questioning what is real and what is imagined. Such narratives tap into a deep human fascination and fear that what we perceive as reality might itself be a fragile construct, subject to forces beyond our understanding. On a more scientific front, while no empirical evidence supports the idea that we are dreams of other minds, the hypothesis stimulates intriguing discussions about the nature of consciousness and the multiverse. Could consciousness be fractal, infinitely recursive, or entangled across dimensions? The idea that one consciousness might dream another blurs the lines between observer and observed, challenging our understanding of existence itself. This looping relationship, where the sleeper dreams you and then you dream the sleeper, can also be seen as a metaphor for empathy and interconnectedness. Each mind contains reflections of others, and our shared experiences might be dreams in each other's consciousness. This perspective dissolves isolation and hints at a deeper unity beneath apparent separateness. Yet, the paradox carries an existential weight. If your reality is a dream of another, what happens when that dreamer wakes? Do you cease to exist? And if you then become the dreamer of that original mind, does the cycle continue forever, with no true beginning or end? This endless oscillation evokes a cosmic dance of consciousness, spinning between waking and dreaming, existence and illusion. As you ponder these possibilities, you may feel a profound disorientation, but also a stirring curiosity. To embrace the idea that you might be both dreamed and dreamer is to embrace mystery itself, the ineffable nature of existence that eludes final definition. In this infinite feedback loop of dreaming and awakening, the self dissolves and reforms continuously. You are at once the dreamer and the dreamed, the creator and the creation. This paradox is not just a puzzle to solve, but an invitation to explore the depths of consciousness and the boundaries of reality. So, when you lie down tonight and close your eyes, remember, the sleeper sleeps you, but you also sleep the sleeper. You are part of an endless tapestry woven from dreams within dreams, and in that interweaving lies the profound mystery of being, the eternal dance between waking and dreaming, self and other, existence and illusion. Self that wasn't first. You define yourself by history, the stories you tell about who you are, the memories you hold, the experiences that shape your identity. Your sense of self is a tapestry woven from the threads of past events, relationships, and reflections. Yet, what if this familiar narrative is not as straightforward as it seems? What if another version of you, somewhere beyond your current perception, thought you into existence first? And now, here you are, imagining that other self back into being, caught in a looping echo of self-definition and creation. This is the paradox of the self that wasn't first, a profound enigma questioning the origins of identity, consciousness, and reality itself. At the heart of this paradox lies the intricate dance between cause and effect, observer and observed, creator and creation. Typically, we assume that our self is the original, the starting point from which all personal history flows. We build our identity linearly, tracing a timeline backward to the earliest memories, experiences, and influences. But what if this linearity is an illusion? What if identity is a recursive phenomenon, where versions of ourselves in different moments, realities, or dimensions co-create one another, forming an endless loop with no definitive beginning? Imagine a hall of mirrors stretching into infinity, each reflection slightly different, yet all connected. One reflection perceives itself as original, unaware that it was conjured by another reflection further down the line. Similarly, your current self may be a construct emerging from the thoughts, memories, or imaginations of another you, who in turn is shaped by your existence. This mutual imagining creates a feedback loop, a self-referential spiral where cause and effect blur, and the notion of a first self becomes meaningless. Philosophers have long grappled with questions of identity and selfhood. The problem of personal identity, what makes you the same person over time, becomes far more complex when we introduce the possibility of multiple, interdependent selves. The idea that one version of you could think you into existence echoes themes from metaphysics and even quantum theories of consciousness, suggesting that reality may not be fixed, but co-created by observers. This paradox also touches on the nature of memory and imagination. Our memories are not perfect recordings, but reconstructions, shaped and reshaped by present perspectives. You imagine your past, but your past also shapes your imagination. Similarly, imagining another version of yourself existing first is both a product and a cause of your current identity. This dynamic interplay challenges the idea of an original, unchanging self. Consider how in literature and film, narratives sometimes loop back on themselves. Characters encounter alternate versions of themselves, or stories rewrite their own beginnings. These stories mirror the self that wasn't first paradox, where origin stories become tangled and infinite. The self is both creator and creation, observer and observed, lost in a hall of recursive reflections. Neuroscience adds another layer, showing that our sense of self is constructed continuously by brain processes integrating sensory input, memory, and anticipation. The self is not a static entity but a dynamic pattern, ever shifting and reconstructing. If the self is a process rather than a thing, then the idea of a first self dissolves into a complex web of interactions, where multiple versions of you might coexist or succeed one another in a nonlinear dance. This paradox forces us to reconsider our understanding of existence. If your current self depends on another self that preceded it in thought or imagination, and that self in turn depends on you, then identity is an emergent property of relational loops rather than a singular starting point. The you that you believe to be original may be one node in an infinite network of selves, each bringing the other into being. Emotionally, this realization can be both unsettling and liberating. It challenges the ego's need for a stable, original identity, but also opens the door to seeing the self as interconnected, fluid, and co-created. It invites humility and wonder at the mysterious ways consciousness and reality intertwine. So when you reflect on who you are, ask yourself, did I begin this story, or was I thought into existence by another self beyond time? And as you imagine that other you, remember that in this infinite loop, beginnings and endings dissolve, leaving only the eternal dance of selves, creating and imagining one another endlessly. The mirror inside mirrors. You look into a mirror. At first, it's just your reflection, familiar and yet strange, a perfect twin that mimics every move you make. But then, your gaze drifts, and in the space behind you, you notice another mirror, catching the reflection of your first reflection. A mirror inside a mirror, like a hall of echoes, infinite layers fold back onto themselves, each holding the last, shrinking smaller and smaller, pulling you deeper into a fractal of reflections. The sensation is unsettling. You realize that what you see is not just a surface image, but an endless recursion, a loop that traps you inside a web of perception. Now focus. Your reflection blinks. And just before your eyes can close, the mirrored image has already moved. It's as if the reflection anticipates you, exists slightly ahead in time, or perhaps outside it. How could this be? Our brains tell us that reflections are just light bouncing back, instantaneous and exact copies of reality. But what if this mirroring is not so simple? What if the reflection is not just an image, but a presence, a shadow of you that can act independently? The mirror has fascinated humans since antiquity. It is more than a tool for vanity or grooming. It is a portal, a boundary between worlds, between the self and the other, the real and the unreal. Philosophers have long debated the nature of the reflection. Is the person in the mirror really you, or a separate entity? The ancient Greeks called the phenomenon eidolon, a ghostly double. In folklore, mirrors were often seen as gateways for spirits or traps for souls. But science, too, hints at deeper mysteries. When you stare into a mirror, what you are really seeing is an image constructed by photons bouncing off your face and hitting the glass. This image is flipped left to right, creating a reversed version of you. But the recursive reflection, the mirror inside a mirror, creates an infinite series of images, each slightly smaller and dimmer, fading into the distance. This mise en abîme effect is not just an artistic trick, but a metaphor for self-awareness, for the infinite regress of consciousness examining itself. Consider an experiment. Place two mirrors facing each other. Look between them and watch how the reflections vanish into an infinite corridor of light and shadow. In that tunnel, your eye is both observer and participant, caught in a dance of endless observation. The experience can be dizzying, disorienting, and even hypnotic. It reveals how perception itself is layered and fractal. Just like the universe may be composed of repeating patterns on every scale, your very sense of self is layered, reflecting within reflections. But why does your reflection blink before you do? Could this be an illusion, a trick of timing and attention? Our brains are not perfect clocks. They process sensory information in stages and sometimes anticipate movement before we consciously act. The reflected image you see might be processed differently, slightly ahead or behind your awareness. This causes a subtle misalignment in perception. Your reflection seems to predict your blink, creating a surreal sensation. The brain's predictive coding system constantly guesses what will happen next to keep perception smooth and continuous. But sometimes, this leads to strange glitches. Another way to see this is through the lens of quantum physics and the nature of observation. At the fundamental level, reality behaves differently when observed. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics propose that observation collapses probabilities into a single outcome. If the mirror is an observer reflecting your image, could it somehow influence or preempt your actions? Could your reflection be a glimpse into a parallel or a future version of yourself? In literature and mythology, mirrors often symbolize duality, the shadow self, or an alternate identity. Think of stories like Through the Looking Glass, where Alice steps into a world that is both familiar and inverted. The mirror becomes a threshold to a hidden dimension, a liminal space where the rules of reality bend. This parallels the experience of seeing the mirror inside mirrors, a space where the boundary between you and your reflection dissolves, leaving only endless layers of self. Psychologically, the mirror is tied to the concept of the mirror stage, introduced by psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan. It is the moment when a child recognizes their own image as themselves, a crucial step in developing identity. The mirror reflects not just the physical form, but the formation of the ego. The recursive mirror can be seen as a metaphor for the mind's constant self-examination, its attempt to understand and contain the self through endless reflection. The sensation of your reflection moving ahead, blinking before you, challenges our sense of control and timing. It evokes a deeper mystery about consciousness and the self. Are we truly the authors of our actions, or are we watching shadows cast by a greater, unseen force? Are mirrors simply objects, or are they devices that expose the hidden architecture of reality? Throughout history, cultures have treated mirrors with awe and suspicion. In some traditions, mirrors were covered after death to trap the departing soul or to prevent spirits from crossing over. The superstition that breaking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck hints at the fragility of this boundary between worlds. Modern psychology explores this through phenomena like the strange face illusion, where prolonged staring into a mirror causes one's reflection to warp, shift, and become grotesque, a testimony to how fragile our perception of identity really is. So the next time you stare into a mirror, remember this. You are not just seeing your face. You are glimpsing an infinite hall of selves, reflections folding into reflections, each one a story, a possibility, a fragment of your consciousness staring back at itself. The mirror inside mirrors is a metaphor for existence itself, layered, recursive, mysterious. And when your reflection blinks before you do, it is as if the image is whispering secrets from beyond the glass, inviting you to question the nature of reality and your place within it. This uncanny experience is not just a trick of light or timing. It is a profound reminder that reality is layered and complex. What you see is never just what you get. Every glance holds infinite depths, every reflection a door to worlds within worlds. In the endless dance of mirrors, the self is both observer and observed, creator and creation. The mirror inside mirrors is the mirror inside you, thought behind the thought. You sit quietly and suddenly a thought emerges. It might be simple, a memory, an idea, a question, but pause for a moment. Where did that thought come from? You might say, it just happened. But if we dig deeper, this first thought is triggered by something else, perhaps a sound, an image, a feeling. But those are also processed by your mind. So what caused the cause? Another thought. And before that, another. It's a chain stretching backward, a never-ending spiral. This is the paradox of the thought behind the thought. Imagine watching a line of dominoes falling. One falls, then the next, and so on. But if you rewind, who pushed the first domino? The moment you try to find a starting point, you realize it slips further away. In your mind, each thought arises because of another thought that came before it. There's no obvious beginning, no initial spark you can identify. The cause of every thought is always another thought, leading to the haunting question, is there ever really a first thought? Or are thoughts an infinite cascade, flowing endlessly in your consciousness? This idea is both unsettling and fascinating. It challenges our fundamental sense of control. We often think we have a conscious mind that decides what to think next. But if every thought is born from a previous one, and that one from another, your control is less like a captain steering a ship and more like a traveler caught in a river's endless current. Each thought pulls you forward, yet you never find the origin. Let's explore an example. You suddenly remember a friend's birthday. That thought appeared, but what triggered it? Maybe you saw a calendar date or heard a song you associate with that person. Those triggers are also thoughts or perceptions. Each perception feeds the next thought. Even the awareness of I'm thinking is itself a thought, created by the cascade. Your mind is a loop, constantly reflecting on itself, like a hall of mirrors. The reflections never stop. They only reveal more reflections. In philosophy, this touches on the problem of infinite regress. It means that when you try to explain the cause of something by referring to another cause, and that to another, and so on without end, you reach no final answer. The thought behind the thought is an infinite regress that denies a clear starting point. This has implications for how we understand consciousness and free will. Consider decision-making. If every choice you make is influenced by the previous thoughts you had, and those by their own causes, how much control do you really have? Are you consciously creating your thoughts, or are you simply responding to an unbroken chain set in motion before you even realized? This questions the very nature of agency. You might feel you are free, but your mind is constantly influenced by layers upon layers of prior thoughts and impressions. There's also a deeper mystical angle here. Some traditions suggest that the ego, the I that thinks, is just another thought, a story your mind tells itself to feel separate and continuous. If the thought behind the thought never ends, then the self might be an illusion, an ongoing narrative formed by the unceasing flow of thoughts. You're not a thinker having thoughts. You are the flow of thoughts itself, with no beginning and no end. This experience can be both freeing and terrifying. Freeing because it means you're not trapped in a rigid, fixed identity. You are fluid, constantly evolving with each thought that arises. Terrifying because it challenges your sense of certainty and control. Yet, within that mystery lies profound insight. When you realize the endless chain of thoughts, you can start to observe them rather than be pulled by them. You become the watcher of the river, not just a leaf drifting along. Practices like meditation emphasize this very point. When you sit still and watch your thoughts, you see that they arise, linger briefly, and then dissolve. There is no first thought to grasp, only a continuous unfolding. This witnessing changes your relationship with your mind. Instead of being overwhelmed or lost, you find a space of calm awareness beneath the swirl of thoughts. To illustrate, imagine a movie projector. The film rolls through, showing scenes one after another. The projector operator watches the film, but does not control every frame. Similarly, your consciousness watches the thoughts pass, but the origin of the first frame remains unknown. The endless train of thoughts is the movie, but the you watching might be beyond it. This leads to a fascinating question. If there is no first thought, does the mind ever rest? Or is it like an eternal flame, always burning, always flickering? Neuroscience shows that even when we try to rest, our brain produces a default mode network, a background activity where thoughts keep arising spontaneously. Our minds seem wired for continuous thought, a mental dance that never truly stops. But then, what about silence? Moments when your mind feels still. Those moments may be rare, but they are real. They hint at a state beyond thought, a place where the endless chain pauses. This silence is often described as peace, presence, or pure awareness. An experience of just being without the constant thought behind the thought. Returning to the question, what caused your thought? The honest answer is that it is impossible to say because each cause is itself a thought, leading infinitely backward. This infinite regress means that the mind's origin cannot be found in the thoughts themselves. Perhaps the root lies outside thought, in something unthinkable, beyond the mind's grasp. This mystery invites humility. Instead of trying to control or fully understand our thoughts, we can learn to accept their nature, fluid, endless, elusive. We become participants in the river of consciousness, aware that the current has no known source, but carries us nonetheless. In the end, the thought behind the thought teaches us about the nature of our own minds. It reveals how deeply interconnected and continuous our inner world is. We are not isolated moments of thinking, but a flowing process, a dance of cause and effect without beginning or end. So the next time a thought appears, instead of chasing its origin, pause and witness. Feel the unfolding mystery within yourself. You are the flow, the observer, and the thought, all at once. And in this realization, a new kind of freedom arises, beyond the endless chain of causes, beyond the search for the first thought. This is the paradox and the profound truth. Thought has no beginning, yet it is always here, shaping our reality, weaving the tapestry of our consciousness moment by moment, breath by breath.